May I remind all members that this meeting is being live streamed on the internet and recorded for archive purposes. Can I ask all members, with the exception of cabinet members and group leaders, to please switch off your cameras and mute your microphones until you're invited to speak. Should you wish to speak, would you please indicate by raising your hands on the function screen, hands on the function on the screen. If this function does not work for any reason, please indicate on the chat function or on the screen. I request the chat function only be used if you have connection or function issues. If you have any technical issues during the meeting, please contact Democratic Services Officer separately. Thank you. We'll start agenda item 1 and apologies for absence. Councillor Johnson.
To give apologies on behalf of Councillor Collins, please.
Thank you. Any other apologies? Thank you very much. None has been received in the office, so I assume everyone's here. Number 2, have a roll call of members.
Okay, good evening, members. Councillor Julie Aviat first, please.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Vincent Bailey.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Rhiannon Birch.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Jonathan Bird.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Bronwyn Brooks.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Liz Burnett.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor George Carroll.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Christine Cave.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Janice Charles.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Jeff Cox.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Robert Crowley.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Andrew Arty Davis.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Pamela Drake.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Vince Driscoll. Councillor Driscoll.
Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry, present, nothing to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Stuart Edwards.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Ben Gray.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Owen Griffiths.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Stephen Griffiths.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Tony Hampton. Councillor Hampton on the call. Okay, thank you. Councillor Sally Hanks.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Nick Hodges.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Hunter Jarvie.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Gwyn John.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Ian Johnson.
Presennol, didn't do that again.
Councillor Gordon Kemp.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Peter King.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Kevin Marnie.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Catherine McCaffer.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Anne Moore.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Neil Moore.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Michael Morgan.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Jane Norman.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Rachel Nugent-Finn.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Andrew Parker.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Bob Penrose.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Sandra Perks.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Andrew Robertson.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Leighton Rowlands.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Ruba Siviniana.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor John Thomas.
Nothing to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Neil Thomas.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Steffan William.
Presennol, I didn't do that again.
Councillor Margaret Wilkinson.
Present, nothing to declare.
Councillor Eddie Williams.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Mark Wilson.
Present and nothing to declare.
And Councillor Margarita Wright. Councillor Wright? No. And I'll just check. Councillor Tony Hampton hasn't joined either, I don't think. So that concludes the roll call.
Thank you. We come to item number 3, is to approve the minutes of meetings held on the 20th of September, 28th of September and the 11th of October.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I move them en bloc? That's items 3.1, 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3, please.
Can I formally second, Madam Mayor?
We have an indication. Councillor Kemp wishes to speak on this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to make a point on the minutes of the meeting of the 28th of September. It's recorded, I think, at page 377 that I said I hadn't read the report. I think it should be made clear the report I was referring to was that of Steve James, not the report that was presented by the leader.
Thank you, Councillor. Can we pass this with the amendment?
Yes, happy to accept that.
Thank you. Thank you. That is accepted then, and we'll go on to item 4. If you receive any announcements from me, cabinet members, etc., etc. Well, I've been fortunate enough with things easing a bit with the COVID lockdown. I've managed to attend a few meetings, a few events. Sorry, I went to the Chaos production of Evita, Barry Friends and Neighbours Welcome Back Lunch, Remembrance Service in the Civic Offices, and Barry Cemetery and Lantrit Major Remembrance Service. Viewed the Book of Remembrance in Barry Library, and if any of you got the chance to go and look at that, it's absolutely wonderful. We celebrated Iqbal Day in Cardiff, Christmas switch on the lights in High Street in Barry. The Peter Beck, the former Lord Lieutenant's memorial service in Llandaff Cathedral. The official opening of the Penkerry Scout Hall in Roos, and a meeting with the Scout District Commissioner with a view to enrolling a new Mayor Scout to assist with civic duties. With Festival of Lights in Barry, which again, lovely, and the Beavers celebration, 40 years celebration in the Memorial Hall in Barry. All in all, things are starting to pick up, and for how long for, I don't know, but we'll keep our fingers crossed it can go on. As long as we're all staying safe and adhering to the rules, we hope to be carrying on a bit further. Leader, have you any announcements?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I couldn't get off mute. No, I don't. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Head of Service?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. And now we've had a Councillor Cave, you wish to present a petition. Could you give us a small indication of what this petition is about, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have a petition to submit this evening from the people living in the turning of Eastview in Landau, and the petition is calling for them to have more parking spaces available to them.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cave. Now we'll move on to item 5, report from the leader about the proposed senior leadership. On this note, I will ask the senior management team to please leave, and if Karen can ensure that they are logged off the system, please, before this is discussed.
Yes, Mayor, all the officers that need to leave have left.
Thank you very much. So it's the leader now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an update on the proposed senior leadership team SLT restructure. The report, and this is really to report the outcome of the staff consultation on the senior executive leadership team, together with asking the council to consider to approve the arrangements for the redesignation of the statutory role of returning officer and associated role of electoral registration officer. So the report recommends that the council notes the consultation process and changes the officer structure, and that obviously is a decision of council why it's here. The report has two themes. The first is to note the results of the consultation carried out amongst the staff and the proposed changes to the officer. The second is to consider and approve the redesignation of the provisions under the Representation of People's Act 1983 as amended, which is in relation to the council's returning officer and electoral registration officer. If you recall, I refer you to the review of the senior management team, which we approved at Cabinet on the 28th of September. The council also noted
Here's what I found.
The council also noted the proposed consultation process and implementation of the timetable. As a result, the council commenced a 30-day staff consultation process. This report notes that the things that arose during the consultation process and the council's responses. In essence, the key responses are as follows. There was a recognition and support for the need for sufficient strategic capacity, which will be met by the creation of the two new directors. Support for the redesignation of the managing director to chief executive. There was some clarification in relation to the positions lines in relation to the section 151 officer within the SLT structure. There was also clarity in relation to the structure of the tiers below the director level. There was issues in terms of value for money considerations in relation to the two director posts in the context and resourcing pressures faced with the council, and considerations regarding the chief executive becoming the council's returning officer and the fact that no payment will be made to the chief executive in relation to the performance of those functions. So the matters arising from the consultation, the position of the section 151 officer and the monitoring officer, I can confirm really that the section 151 officer and the monitoring officer will be part of the senior leadership team and will report directly to the chief executive on the section 151 issues and the monitoring officer issues. The council does recognise that it's important that these officers are in positions, and this will enable them to discharge their statutory functions, because let's remember they are statutory officers, and also be included in the senior executive leadership team. The council recognises the section 151 officer and the monitoring officer have personal duties, and this will not be subject to supervision by officers in charge of their duties. In terms of cost and valuation for money, I think it was acknowledged at the council that the creation of the two new directors' posts will carry some of the financial burdens. But it's also mindful, and we're also mindful of the resources of some of the departments within the council. Nevertheless, the council considered that this was an important investment which was necessary to ensure, and we took that decision at the special council meeting. There was a query whether or not there will be two tiers of directors, in other words, different salaries. I can confirm that the two director posts will be based on the current salary bands for the directors' roles. I want to just confirm on paragraph 410, it says, as such, is not envisaged the two salary structures will result from the introduction of the two new directors. I will confirm here and clarify there will not be a two-tier system within the system, and it was never intended to be such. There was also queries about the next tier structures below the directors. The report which we had indicated that the new posts, once in post, would review the next structure and ensure the appropriate fit and focus on the agenda and considered to be appropriate, and that was considered to be an appropriate approach. In relation to the posts themselves, it didn't include a structure for the third tier, if you recall, and I can confirm there will be no change to the existing job titles in the short term at least. I reiterate that as noted in the report, the recommendations made are limited to the changes to senior executive team and not below. There was an issue in relation to the returning officer and electoral registration officer, and we do recognise the responsibilities involved with those roles, and that ceasing the current arrangements for the electoral duties would need to shift these responsibilities to the Chief Executive. It is a responsibility of Council that we have to declare who the returning officer and electoral returning officers are. There were some changes in the Local Government and Election Wales Act 2021, and they inserted a different clause within 36C. So basically what's happened is that the situation as I read it, and one of the things that I will be doing tonight is asking Council to waive standing orders, because one of the things that we did do in relation to this report is we took advice from Geldard's solicitors on the basis that a senior leadership team could not be involved in the consultation or this report to Council. My understanding is, in terms of the payments, there can be payments for things like parliamentary, Welsh Government, PCCs, Police and Crime Commissioners, referenda, etc. But there will no longer be any payment for local government elections payments in terms of that. In that it becomes part of the duties of local government. And what I would do is also refer you to the policy document, the pay policy document that we actually agreed at Council in February 2021, which actually confirmed that there wouldn't be payments for that. There may be some grants continue to be paid to the Council, and they will be shared out as appropriate with the employees responsible for the conduct of those elections. But in real terms, what we're asking for is that the returning officer's role and overall responsibility for the conduct of elections will rest with the Chief Executive from now on. And it's proposed that in this case, the Managing Director, as he is still called at the moment, because we have not changed any title because of the consultation, is formally designated as the proper officer for all electoral registration and returning officer functions on that basis with effect from tomorrow. The report is slightly misleading in that on paragraph 5.5, it talks about the responsibilities of the above, which is the returning officer and electoral returning officer, is covered in paragraphs 420 to 423. In fact, it should read 421 to 427. I'm afraid it wasn't picked up on one of the iterations of the report. Therefore, for the reasons and the arrangements, we don't invoke Regulation 9 of the Local Authority Standing Order Wales Amendment Regulations 2014, and as such does not need to be subject to external advertisement. This is accordance with Schedule 1 of the Local Authority Standing Orders Wales Regulations. So what I'm going to do is going to formally move that we suspend standing orders for this item, in order for Geldard's to make any comments should it be necessary. That we recommend in the Council notes the outcome of the recent consultation, and as you see, you've had the responses, that 2, the Council's Managing Director be designated as the Council's returning officer alongside the associated role of the Council's electoral registration officer with effect from the 7th of December, and the duties will continue when the post title changes to the Chief Executive. As a result of that, the third one obviously is that the Council's constitution is amended to reflect the designation of the roles as set out above. And can I formally move the waiving of standing orders for this item and the recommendations that I've read out. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And Madam Mayor, could I formally second both the recommendations and the suspension of standing orders?
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Carroll, you wish to speak on this?
Yes, thank you very much. Madam Mayor, and I thank the leader for his report. With regard to the proposed changes to the Constitution and the designation of the Chief Executive as the Council's Electoral Registration Officer and Returning Officer, the Conservative Group support these changes. They obviously are being done to comply with the new legislation and ensure that we comply with the law. I don't really want to go back over the discussion regarding the creation of the 2 new directors. Previously, the Conservative group set out our opposition to that. We voted against, but democracy prevailed and a majority of the authority voted in favour of the creation of those posts. I do just have one question for the leader, though. My understanding on reading the report is that we're merely noting the outcome of the consultation with staff members. Now, personally, I and many other members, I'm sure, won't agree with all aspects of that consultation, particularly the support for the creation of those 2 new roles. I'd just like clarification from the leader that we're not endorsing that consultation or endorsing those roles by supporting the recommendations. As I've said, I don't wish to force a vote for the sake of it, so if we could have that confirmation, then obviously we would support the recommendations.
I'm happy to confirm that we are noting the results of the consultation. It is something which we didn't really need to do, but it's something that we as a council have always done. We have always negotiated and talked to our members of staff and trade unions. And it's interesting to note some of the comments was made through in the JCF, which went to Cabinet, the minutes of which went to Cabinet today. In terms of whether we're endorsing the two roles, that has already been agreed and decided by Council. So really the fact that this report does 2 things. As I said, the first one is to note the consultation responses and the comments, because there was some confusion about whether or not there would be 2-tier posts, and there won't be. There was confusion about what happens underneath the directors, and the report that we had took to council was quite clear that it's only related to the directors and not below, and that once it was approved as it was, that would take shape as and when the new directors are appointed. So this report does not reflect or go backwards in terms of whether or not we have 2 directors. In fact, what it does do is confirm that one, we note the comments from staff and the responses, and 2, that we redesignate the position of what's it called, the Electoral Registration Officer and the ERO with effect from tomorrow. So you know, the decision in terms of 2 directors has already been made. So basically, it was this is only really to support what has been done. It was a consultation process within 30 days. Comments came in, we've given the answers. And as I said, we did use Geldards in order to do that. So if there was any query, then they're available. But I think the report is quite straightforward. We note the comments and we redesignate.
Councillor Kemp has indicated he wishes to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions for the leader. Can you confirm that the consultation involved all staff, except presumably the senior management? And are you able to give any indication as to the percentage of responses?
I can confirm everybody was encouraged to respond at all levels. The responses were quite light. I can't give you a percentage. It was there were. I can't remember the exact number, to be honest, but there weren't that many. I don't know whether or not anybody else on the floor can give me the exact number, but it was very, very minimal. Despite the fact that we went out on several occasions to remind people if the consultation was open, and as I said, it was open from the 8th of October. Sorry, it was open until 30 days process on the 8th of October. So, and it concluded on the 8th of November. But the number.
Thank you for that information, Leader. I think, unfortunately, it's probably the usual response to consultation, as you say, not a particularly heavy response.
No, it wasn't. In all honesty, if you want to know the numbers, I can do that, but it's minimal.
Thank you, Leader. And can we just note this and accept the report? Right, that is agreed.
Thank you very much, and can I thank Geldas for being on call if ever needed. Thank you. I think we need to bring back in the.
We need to bring the senior management in now. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Mayor, we are doing that as we speak. But I just wanted to let you all know, for the public who are viewing tonight, that Annabel Graham-Paul did come in on the Teams call just 2 seconds ago before we finally did that item. So if the public are viewing, Annabel is here to deal with the biomass. She's not an officer from the authority. Thank you.
Indeed, and when we get to that particular report, then I would be asking council to waive standing orders as we did at ENR, so that Annabel Graham-Paul and indeed officers can speak if necessary.
Thank you, Leader. And we go on to item 6, which is a council safety support. And I think Councillor Bailey is going to lead on this.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The Democratic Services Committee considered proposed guidance, which, subject to council approval this evening, will be circulated to all members. The intention of the proposed purposed guidance is to put in place, in addition to a range of other resources already circulated to members following the tragic murder of Sir David Amos MP on the 15th of October 2021, practical measures that elected colleagues should consider and take when discharging their roles when working in their communities. As stated in the report, the Welsh Local Government Association will be writing to all police and crime commissioners and chief constables to ensure that they also consider the risks, abuse and threats councillors, particularly senior councillors, face. The report is also recommending that in such circumstances where the council is required to act quickly to support the provision of reasonable measures on the advice of the police or security services, that delegated authority be granted to the head of democratic services and the S151 officer, head of finance, to consider and determine any request for such funding. I'm aware that Cabinet considered the matter earlier today. Council is therefore being asked to support and approve the measures set out in recommendations 1 and 2 of the report, which includes agreeing that the council fund appropriate security measures where councillors are at personal risk or significant threat. I so move the recommendations as set out in the minutes of the meeting.
Do you have a second of this?
Yes, Mayor, I will happily second the report. Councillor Bailey is absolutely correct. It did go to Cabinet today, and they endorsed the comments that were made by the Democratic Services Committee and also recommended endorsement of the guidance at Council this evening. So I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Thank you, Leader. That is agreed. Thank you. Item 7, I understand Councillor Bailey is taking this one again.
Yeah, thanks again, Madam Mayor. Members will recall that the Council at its meeting on the 26th of July resolved to make a diverse Council declaration, part of which gave an undertaking to set out an action plan of activity ahead of the local government elections in 2022. A draft action plan was considered by the Democratic Services Committee on the 22nd of November, which objectives were in part based on those suggested by Welsh Government. The committee, having considered the action plan, gave its endorsement and agreed to refer it to Council, recommending its adoption. I so move.
Mayor, can I formally second and again in the same vein, this was discussed by Cabinet this afternoon, and again agreed with the recommendations and again recommended approval and endorsement at Council this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to not only add my support to this, but draw attention that when we talk about diversity and democracy, I think we have to recognise that not everybody travels the same route into representation. People have different journeys in life. Some people are able to take on that representative role earlier, some people later. Some people have caring responsibilities of various sorts, and other commitments that they have to meet. So the recognition of those commitments, of those different journeys, is very, very welcome. But I think it's interesting that these two reports have come adjacent to each other on this agenda, because it's also worth noting that safety and support of elected members actually can have a huge impact on whether or not somebody participates. I've actually had people saying to me, you know, I've actually thought about being a councillor, but there's no way, not when I've seen what happens. And that's a real shame, isn't it? We are part of our communities. Many of us have lived in our communities or our wards our entire life. We know the people that are posting the abuse. I knew the person that wrote lock and load at the end of his email. We know those people. We can't stop being out and about in our communities. We wouldn't want to. So for all those people that are thinking of entering or having some sort of representative role, we need to be there. We need to be supporting them and making sure that they feel safe and that they feel secure in their important role within the democracy of our council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. I assume that has been carried and it is agreed. Thank you very much. We're moving on now to item number 8. And I think it's Councillor Wilson has taken this one.
No, number 8 is the use of the
Number
managing...
8, sorry, number 8 is you, is it, Leader? Thank you.
Yes, it is. It's the use of the managing director's emergency powers, as is normal. The managing director takes decisions. They're not. They are to. Sorry. This is to notify the council of those decisions taken. As I said, they have been taken. It is for noting, and those items where he's taken those decisions are covered within paragraphs 2.1 to 2.1, full stop, A to E. They are simply for noting as they have already been agreed. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Leader.
I formally move, just in case anybody questions it. Can I have a second, please?
And I'll formally second, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. That is agreed. Now, I think it's Councillor Wilson is taking item number 9.
Yes, Madam.
Yes, it is. And thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I just will... Second. Okay, I, as President of Chair of the Scrutiny Committee Chairs and Vice Chairs, the annual report in accordance with section 7.44 of the Council Constitution. The report accounts for the municipal years 2019 to 20 and 2021 due to suspension of the Council's calendar meetings in March 20 as a result of COVID-19. The report details the role of scrutiny, how scrutiny is undertaken in the Vale Glamorgan Council, and highlights key achievements from the work of each scrutiny committee. Significant events during these municipal years and future working, especially in relation to the Council's agreement that the work of scrutiny should be closely aligned to the 4 wellbeing outcomes of the Council's corporate plan 2016 to 2020 and subsequently the 4 wellbeing objectives that form the main basis of the Council's new corporate plan. The report also highlights key achievements and progress made in respect of the audit wells, overview and scrutiny fit for the future. The report, having been considered by the Scrutiny Committee's Chairs and Vice Chairs group, was circulated to all members of the Scrutiny Committee for comment. Please note that the annual report is only reported to Council as opposed to requiring actual approval. I would like to extend to the members of the Scrutiny Committees, in particular those who sat as Chairs and Vice Chairs, for their commitment and contributions to our work, and normally officers in Democrat and Scrutiny Services supported us effectively during which has been an extremely period for the Council. So I'll present the report to yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Do you have a second of that report? Or just accepted?
If nobody from scrutiny will second it, then I will second it.
Thank you. And so that is accepted. That is agreed. Thank you. And moving on, item 10.
Yes, item 10A is a review of the Statement of Principles of the Gambling Act 2005. I don't know whether Councillor John Thomas wants to say anything, but basically this is a reference from the Statutory Licensing Committee, which went to Cabinet and needs to come here for endorsement. The licensing team manager reported the statutory consultation required to renew the above statement of principles prior to being considered by Council tonight. Section 349 of the Gambling Act requires that the licensing authority publish a statement of principles of governing its licensing policy for a 3-year period. The current statement expires at the end of 2021. The report outlined the review and renewal of the process for 22-25 and the report back on the statutory consultation. The report went to the Licensing Committee on the 21st of September. And having fully considered the report, the Licensing Committee approved the Statement of Principles. But as I say, it has to come here for formal ratification. I can go into it if you want to, but unless Councillor John Thomas, who is Chair of Licensing, wishes to make any comment, can I formally move that we endorse the new policy, please?
Councillor Williams, Eddie Williams, which was just...
Yeah, thanks, Leader. Thanks, Mayor. But, yeah, I was going to comment on the report because I did comment on the Cabinet. This is quite one of those reports in the background which it comes from Council and there's not much on the agenda. But underneath, it's the Licence Committee that scrutinised it and come up and agrees with the principles. And some of the information in that report indicates that, you know, gambling is one of those main issues that is a concern. And I was pleasantly surprised that it hasn't increased by the last year or so. There's evidence to support that it's in decline with the number of betting shops and things like that. So on behalf, there's a report from the solicitors on behalf of the Betting and Gaming Council that indicated. So there's some evidence to support that. So I concur with what you've said there, Leader. And I thank the committee, the Licence Committee, for their work in this process as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Leader, you wish to move?
Yeah, I have formally moved, Mayor, and I think so.
And Councillor Williams second. Thank you very much. That is agreed. We will now go on to item 10B. And the Leader has requested we move standing orders for this one.
I am, Mayor. I'm going to ask the Council to waive standing orders to allow Honourable Graham Paul to speak, as she did at the Environment Committee, should it be necessary, and I guess it will be. Can I also move that the suspension standing orders in order to allow officers to speak too, because I think we need to get a full background on this.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you want to take a vote on that, or everybody's agreed, then fine, because I think it's more sensible.
There's no indication that anybody wishes to object, so I take it.
Thank you very much. What I would like to do, if I can, is to just begin by referring the matter. It came, and there's a reference now on the 22nd of November from Cabinet, and basically what happened is that we considered that report on the 22nd of November, and what I will be doing is recommending a resolution is that the Vale Biomass Independent Review report be endorsed and noted, and basically I think that's where we need to be. What I'd like to do, if I could, is just have a recap of where we currently are. If you recall, there was a resolution on 26th of February 2020 which had some elements within it. I think we've complied with all of them. The one that's really outstanding is this one in terms of the review. It went to Cabinet on the 27th of September, and I'd like to go through some of the issues in terms of that, if I could. The report related to the resolution, as I said, of an independent review of the Vale Glamorgan Council's determination of all planning applications related to Barry Biomass Incinerator. As I said, an independent barrister specialising in planning and environmental law, which is Annabel Graham-Paul, who is with us this evening, was appointed to undertake the review. Attached at Appendix 1 to that report, and I guess you should all have a copy of it too, is the independent review report with the findings, and that was dated the 10th of June 2021. It's summarised in the report itself, together with additional information which were also provided after in respect of matters post February 2020. The independent reviewer's observation are also set out in the report in respect of the Welsh Government's interim decision dated the 29th of July. As you recall, in February, we asked the planning committee. We reviewed the fact that the planning committee had determined 3 planning applications relating to the biomass plant: the 2015 outline application, the 2015 conditions discharge, and the 2016 reserve matters permission. The independent barrister was appointed to undertake an independent review of those planning applications. The reviewer's conclusions are covered within the report. It is concluded that the council's officers acted under delegated authority did not act unlawfully in finding that no EIA was required for the outline permission. The reviewer concluded that the screening lawfully took place and proper judgment was exercised by the council officers acting under delegation authority. However, she does make the point, and I'm sure she will express her views on that, it would be better practice to consider the environmental effects in more detail in relation to the particular scheme, rather than placing reliance on the fact of the previous negative screening opinion for 2008 scheme. And I think there is some background to the 2008 scheme, if you recall, because it was originally refused an application by the planning committee. It went to appeal, and it was allowed. During the period when it was looked at, there was a lot of what can you say, correspondence between our officers and Welsh Government, and it was deemed that it was not necessary to have an EIA at that time. In relation to the lack of progress in relation to the outstanding issues, the reviewer also notes the position of the officers was that whilst the plant was not fully operational, it was appropriate to work with the developers to seek compliance with the conditions that had been approved in 2015. The reviewer concluded that in her view, it was perfectly proper for the officers to seek resolution of these outstanding issues with the developer directly rather than proceeding immediately to enforcement action. The reviewer highlights the experience test when considering enforcement, and the reviewer also concluded that given the site is multifaceted and complex, this was an appropriate case for working with the developer rather than proceeding to enforcement during 2020. The reviewer concludes that she finds no evidence from the documents reviewed of any maladministration or bias, or any other evidence of officers seeking to bury things or cover things up. Neither has the reviewer found any evidence that gives her cause for any concern that officers have acted negligently or unprofessionally, and the reviewer further concludes there is no evidence of illegality or maladministration in the process of dealing with the application referred to. However, the reviewer report deals solely with planning applications up until February 2020, and I think that's something that needs to be remembered. Since 2016, when the construction of the biomass commenced, it became apparent, following detailed investigations, that there were several discrepancies between the consented scheme and that which has been built. These included differences between environment approved layout and elevation plans and the provision of additional structures, plant equipment and the extension to the site. The council wrote to the developer in January 2021, and this is somewhat of an update now, but we need to know where we are, confirming that the Section 73 application should be submitted to regularise the whole development. However, the developer has continued to dispute this position. On the 12th of May 2020, the developer had submitted a retrospective Section 73A application for the fire water tank that had been reconstructed without permission. No further amendments or Section 73A applications have been received for the remaining structures, which therefore remain unauthorised. The planning enforcement notice was subsequently served on the developer on the 17th of September and took into effect from the 17th of October, unless an appeal against enforcement was received before that date. And as we all know, an appeal has been listed. As we all know, an issue has been raised in relation to whether an environmental impact assessment was required. At the time of the outline application in 2015, and when it was under consideration, the council screened the proposed development and concluded that an EIA was not required. And I guess this will form part of the debate tonight. The Welsh Government also undertook an assessment at that time and concluded that the screening direction and EIA was not required. In February 2018, Welsh Government considered whether the development had been correctly screened, and since that time has been considering its position about the need or otherwise for an EIA assessment to be undertaken. In terms of Welsh Government, there was an interim decision, as we all know, on the 29th of July, which concluded that the development approved under the 2015 outline planning permission was a Schedule 1 development and should have been subject to an EIA. The council has referred the Welsh Government, the council has referred the Welsh Government's interim decision to the reviewer, which is slightly outside of the original scope. And she has confirmed that this doesn't change her advice, particularly in relation to paragraph 16, where she said that the reasoning of the officer that the biomass plant does not incinerate waste and thus does not fall in Schedule 1 appears to be sound. And again, I guess this opinion is the one that's being challenged tonight. The council's views are consistent with those of the Welsh Government in respect to the earlier schemes. The Welsh Government reiterate the view that development was a Schedule 2 development in 2015 in correspondence between the Minister of Natural Resources and Planning at the time and Clark Keenan solicitors. And again, the reviewer has stated that this is of itself demonstrates the planning officers did not act unreasonably at the time and maintains that it is no evidence of maladministration on the part of officers. Going forward, if we can, Welsh Government has confirmed an environmental survey has been submitted. It's also decided it's not necessary to serve a discontinuation notice, as they do not consider, on the basis of the information seen so far, that there is likely significant environmental effects identified. Therefore, full environmental impacts are being considered. In terms of the Welsh Government's interim decision, it wouldn't be expedient for us to order, they decided it would not be expedient for them to order a discontinuation notice. Welsh Government next steps have been to undertake a public consultation on the environmental statement provided by the developer, and just for the information, that has been extended to the 17th of January. So I would encourage everybody to consider that. And the plant is currently suspended operations whilst the EIA is undertaken. As I said, we have Annabel Graham-Paul with us, plus officers, and we waived standing orders. If you recall, the resolution called for an independent review of the determination of all planning applications, and that is not a review, not an inquiry. Clearly, I was present at ENR, and there were some concerns about whether or not it was independent. Some people considered it was not a review. Some people considered the report was biased and a blanket exoneration of officers, which I do not accept. And ER members concentrated on the EIA and whether the development was a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 application. I believe that what is being suggested is that the barrister should have considered whether an EIA was required, but I would remind you, Council asked to review the actions taken, not asked to determine whether an EIA was required. So the barrister's review has been presented to Cabinet, and they had endorsed and noted the report, and then therefore move that the independent review be accepted, and that and that it be agreed that the resolution of the council has been fulfilled. Can I formally move? Sorry, I went on there, but I think the background needed to be placed in order, and I would like to come back at the end of the report as the mover of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader.
Can I formally second, Mayor, and reserve the right to come back if so wished?
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Councillor Bailey has indicated he wishes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a few comments. Yeah, I have to confess I agree with the comments that were made during that session of the Committee of ENR, Environment and Regeneration. The review feels as though it were neither independent or indeed thorough. I do find it difficult to understand the conclusion which continues to be drawn that the biomass project was not a Schedule 1 development. The Welsh Government ministers concluded in a letter dated the 29th of July that it should have been subjected to.
Somebody's got their mic on, I think, and I can't hear Councillor Bailey. Sorry.
Shall I continue?
Sorry, Vince, I couldn't hear you.
Could you reiterate, please, Councillor? There was a lot of interference on the screen.
Sure. I find it difficult to understand the conclusion which continues to be drawn that the biomass project was not a Schedule 1 development. The Welsh Government Minister concluded such in her letter dated the 29th of July that it should have been subjected to a proper EIA. The report contains inaccuracies, not least its appraisal of the Welsh Government's comments. The blanket exoneration detailed in paragraph 2.5 does ignore the fact that it was no such thing. Indeed, the barrister who carried it out acknowledged that it's merely a patchwork exercise that looked at only parts of the decision-making process. Clearly, verbal conversations between officers haven't been accounted for, and whilst that would require a test of memory of those involved, you can't stretch to call it a blanket exoneration on this basis. It's also worth restating the fact that the European Commission has issued clear advice that gasification amounts to incineration, and it doesn't require any technical knowledge to draw that conclusion. The review focuses on the planning decision process and has not included interviews with officers, which would have enabled a more thorough review to have been conducted. Indeed, a lot of the conclusions, the ones outlined by the leader, that are drawn in this report may perhaps have been more convincing if those interviews had taken place. The letter that's been circulated by DIAG ahead of this meeting details at great length the many omissions and shortfalls in this report, far better than I can. And indeed so persuasive is it, I find it hard to believe anyone who's read it in full could endorse this report as we're being asked to this evening. This isn't the review that we asked for. I hope that fellow councillors will join me in rejecting it as a half-baked and disappointing attempt to smooth over the many deeply held concerns that members of the public have. I'd perhaps on John, I'd also like to call for a recorded vote, please, Madam Mayor.
Somebody has their microphone open and it's causing a lot of interference. Can you make sure, please, unless you're speaking, your microphone is muted? Thank you.
Can I ask, did Councillor Bailey move something then? Because I
just called for a recorded vote, Leader.
Sorry?
Called for a recorded vote.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree to recorded vote.
And who was that, please?
Sorry.
I agree to recorded vote.
Could you indicate who spoke then, please?
It's Councillor Charles M. Robertson so far.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Kevin Marley also. I've also got my hand up in the air to speak, thanks.
Yes, there are people before you, Councillor Marnie. We're just dealing with one speaker at the moment. Please, would you wait?
Mayor, I think people are putting their hand up to indicate they want a recorded vote. If there's not enough members, I'm happy to join with them.
The trouble is, Leader, I don't know who's putting their hand up for recorded votes and who's putting their hand up to speak. If you could put your hands down, please, for a moment, and we will clarify whether you want to speak or whether you want a recorded vote. Could you please all lower your hands and we will ask the question. Thank you. Councillor Hodges, could you lower your hand, please? Thank you. Right. With those councillors wishing Councillor Hodges, could you lower your hand, please?
Doesn't work.
Oh, it's gone.
Doesn't work.
Right, councillors, could you indicate, please, whether you wish to have a recorded vote by raising your hands in the hand function?
That's sufficient, Mayor.
That is sufficient, yes. We will go for a recorded vote on this. Thank you. You can lower your hands now, councillors. Thank you.
I'll get on with it.
Could you please lower your hands, councillors? Thank you. Can we go with a recorded vote, please?
What?
Do we not need to have the rest of the debate first, Madam Mayor?
Mayor, there were a few people waiting to be called in. Councillor Johnson was one, Councillor Marnie was another, and I think Councillor Nick Hodges was the third, from what I can recall.
Yes.
Which is exactly what I tried to point out when you were rather sarcastic towards me, because I knew you were going to do that.
Please do not shout out. You will be called to speak in turn. There are other people indicating to speak before you.
But you were going to hold the vote without that.
Can you wait a moment, please? Thank you.
Can I just ask Councillor Nick Hodges to put his microphone on mute, please?
Thank you. Right, Councillor Johnson, you were next on the list to speak. Would you like to speak now, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to the leader and to Councillor Bailey. So it was Councillor Bailey's original motion back in 2020 that we're now discussing again. This has been quite a strange process. Obviously, the report that Council called for went to Cabinet first, went to environmental regeneration and to planning, back to Cabinet and on to here. I was pleased to be able to speak to listen to the debate at environment and regeneration, although I didn't speak at the time because I thought we'd have a chance at planning. It felt a bit strange to be having a debate at environmental regeneration with people who maybe hadn't spent so long close to the planning system as those who, of course, who've been at planning for a long time. I also felt it was a bit strange watching sort of the shotgun marriage of the independent review that we received alongside the letter that was sent to DIAG, formed into one document. I thought that was a bit strange, but then I kind of felt that when I read the Welsh Government document again, that actually the contrast between the two is quite stark, particularly the way that the Welsh Government document asserts that both the 2010 Planning Commission and the 2015 should have been subject to Schedule 1 EIA, and it does that in a quite simple and matter-of-fact manner. Which I think is very different to a lot of the hoopla that we've had in this discussion regarding the incinerator over the last 13 years or so. It's a quite simple process in their mind. The checklist is simple. It's a flowchart. Is it an incinerator? Yes. Is it above 100 tonnes? Yes. Well, in that case, it should be subject to Schedule 1 EIA. Now, it's great to see the Welsh Government doing that with hindsight. I think Welsh Government has probably changed its position on a wider basis regarding incineration since the start of this process way back in 2008. But it's not just a matter of hindsight. These are the issues that were being discussed and will have been discussed live in 2015. It's what the public thought. It's what DIAG thought. It's what Friends of the Earth thought. It's what Plaid Cymru thought. So, I mean, it seems quite strange that that such a simple system seems to have not ended up in an EIA that was being discussed at full council. And in fact, I think that the meeting on the 30th of July 2015, in which I was present, probably shouldn't have taken place because an EIA should have been requested at that point. And so I think, to be honest, coming to any other conclusion from going through that checklist leads to a fairly obtuse answer, and I think some of that is drawn out in the review here, but some of it simply makes very little sense. I think we have to look at what this was contemporary. Friends of the Earth explained this, they set it out to people, and that advice, those suggestions were ignored at the time by officers and by Welsh Government as well. So the questions are the lessons to learn. Well, it's not just about refreshing every time and reassessing from scratch. Actually, it's about listening to others. I don't understand why officers didn't listen to the suggestions and consider that from a neutral position. Was that groupthink? Was that arrogance that they knew better than members of the public and groups who were discussing this? Was it simply that were they being lobbied by elsewhere, or was there pressure being put onto them? I really don't know. The issue is that the decision was made on the 30th of July 2015 that would not have been made had an EIA been there, because that decision should not have been made that night. And there's an impact of that. I know others want to talk about the the meeting itself. Members feel they were gagged. Members feel that they weren't allowed to discuss the issues that were of great importance to them, which include environmental issues above and beyond that of the environmental impact assessment. I think that that has a wider impact because that planning permission was granted that night, and that planning permission should not have been granted that night. Now, there are a couple of issues I do want to raise. I think it's I think that the Diag letter to councillors suggests that it's quite brave of the reviewer to admit that they don't know whether something is should have been Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. I think that is something, and I appreciate the leader's comments earlier, but that is something that I think that this council needs to understand. Everybody now, it seems, except this council, seems to agree that it should have been Schedule 1, and it was an error not to have done so at the time. I wanted to move on very briefly to the notes regarding the development of national significance. That was part of our wider discussion in the meeting in February 2020. I think there's been a miscommunication at some point between this council and council, in that obviously that wasn't a matter for discussion or debate when the 2015 planning application was being debated. It's something that's taken place since then due to the change in the regulations. And I think what we wanted to know as a council, what we still want to know, because I think the minister's letter is silent on it, is whether or not this should now be treated as a development of national significance on the basis of its
Councillor
size.
Johnson, can I just say it's 5 minutes, just over 5 minutes, in fact.
Thank you very much to the Managing Director. What I'd like to do, just very briefly, Madam Mayor, is I note Councillor Bailey's comments, but I also would like Council to consider rejecting. I move that Council rejects this review and requests further information on particularly on the 2 points that I've raised there, whether or not it should have been a Schedule 1 from the get-go. And with regards to the development of national significance, I'm sure that the councillors will have other things they'd like to raise, but I'd like to move that we reject and consider those issues further to the report that we have in front of us. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the Leader and others for their time tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Hodges, you wish to speak next?
Yes, please. Hello, Council. The 30th of July 2015, the planning meeting, a date that will live in infamy. Who was there? Who is still there? Of the 21 councillors on that planning committee, 6 are still on the planning committee today. The vote was forced. The vote came about quite simply because the debate was gagged. I was gagged. I wish to talk about the environmental impact and the noise impacts and all the other impacts of this site, and I was prevented in doing so. No other planning committee I've ever been on prevents you from actually talking about the effects that the planning application bring and the mitigation necessary to stop the worst effects of any planning decision. The public at the time knew it was a Schedule 1 and needed an EIA. So did Plaid Cymru. So did Barry Town Council. It was well known that the Schedule 1 was necessary with over 100 tonnes a day. It plainly needed an EIA and a Schedule 1. Then we come to the whole supposed confusion about, is it gasification or is it incineration? Well, the EIA that's been produced in huge detail by the biomass company, actually in its short version 9.18, accepts it's incineration. Everyone accepted it was incineration. Everyone perhaps except the leader of the council with his front page story in the Barrion district in March of 2017. It is not an incinerator, it is a gasification plant and an energy recovery facility. That thinking still bogs us. 6 years on, we are still dealing with this matter. This meeting lost our council all control over the issue. It's interesting to see that there's only 2 present members of the planning committee that actually voted against this incinerator in our town. One is Councillor Pam Drake, the other is myself. The vast majority of the Labour Party voted for it. All the Conservative Party voted for it, whether they're present Conservatives or present independents. And this is where we are now, backed up, of course, by Llantwit First. This is a situation that's been forced upon us as a town, as a council, and something that blights us to this day. And I will finish with the final point. When the then ward councillor for Castle Land Ward, Councillor Elmore, whatever happened to him, said that it would hamper regeneration in Barry. The then and now present cabinet member for regeneration, Liz Burnett, supported the approval of the incinerator. There's a lot of traces trying to be kicked over here. There's a lot of facts trying to be buried and hidden. This is something that blights our town. And if we can now have a proper debate on it when we accept that it should have been a Schedule 1, that it is an incinerator, then perhaps we can move forward as a council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. Councillor Marnie, you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, what a complete and utter shambles from start to finish. I find it quite incredible, actually. I mean, I'm not going to argue with a barrister or whatever who's examined this or been asked to review this, if you like. I mean, he or she, I think it is bound by the articles of the review that they've been given. And yet, here you are arguing about Schedule 1, Schedule 2, all the rest of it. I think my point is this, is that as possibly one of the most virtue signalling councils on record seems to issue a climate emergency edict every few months, surely to protect the citizens of Barry and the surrounding areas and villages and the Vale of Glamorgan, that an EIA should have been insisted on, come what may, by this council. We're, I assume, being asked to now vote on a review of this, which would in effect almost endorse what has happened here. Well, I'm not going to do that, and I can see people's faces on the screen who aren't going to do that. We're not going to endorse that. And I'm also not happy that an EIA, I have asked repeatedly in council, it's a matter of record, that this council spend however much it costs to have a national or international expert on these plants prepare a report on the implications of the health of the people of this area, and been turned down every single time. I think it's incumbent on a local authority to ensure the safety and health of its citizens. And unless I'm mistaken, now this EIA has been provided by the developers. I don't want an EIA provided by the developers. I want one provided by our council using our taxpayers' money at a time when we're creating £140,000 a year jobs out of thin air. I don't think there's one resident of the Vale of Glamorgan who would object to however much it costs for this council to provide an EIA to demonstrate what the implications are for the health of everybody in this area. It's an absolute disgrace. So I can't possibly vote for this. There's nothing against the barrister who's prepared this, but it would, in effect, it would be endorsing the actions of the officers, quite frankly. Something might be lawful, but you're still arguing about whether it's a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. And I will finish off, but I would like to say to the Mayor here, who rather patronisingly spoke to me earlier, I knew full well the way you were shaping up there, that you were going to go straight into a vote without listening to the arguments, and that's exactly what you subsequently did. So I would request of you in the future to stop being so patronising to people such as myself who are operating under difficult circumstances in here on these Zoom or team meetings or whatever they are, when exactly what I thought you were going to do, you were going to do until you were pulled up by an officer of this council. And that perhaps you might want to stop and think a bit earlier when you're speaking to people in that fashion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Marnie, and I appreciate your comments. Councillor Stephen William.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I would like to second Ian Johnson's proposals, and I'll tell you why. Although I only have 5 minutes, and that's the problem. After I raised these issues at the Economy and Regeneration meeting, I did not really get satisfactory answers. I believe that, as has been raised earlier this evening, that the EIA is one that is almost prepared in collusion with others so that the company wouldn't have to answer any awkward questions. It's not a proper EIA at all. The trouble is I only have 5 minutes, and if you look at the report, there are so many reasons indeed why we should be rejecting this report. So I do urge fellow councillors, this is otherwise going to be a whitewash of a report. It really isn't good enough. It's not good enough, and it's an insult to the people of Barry. It really is. And if we really do care about our environment, then we should be rejecting this report, because it's nonsense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor William. Councillor Andrew Robson.
Thank you, Lady Mayoress. Thank you, Lady Mayoress. I first of all, I'd like to endorse everything that Councillor Marnie said. I think it's very clear that what is needed here is a fully independent scrutiny of this biomass plant, an independent report on the IEA. It's extremely important, and that's what the people of Barry want. I think it's something which we can't deny them. At every Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee meeting that I've been at where this has cropped up, there's always been a suggestion that the monitoring of the biomass plant should be done by the actual the biomass plant itself, which is obviously crazy. It has to be independent. There has to be a serious independent review of the implications of the plant, and there has to be independent monitoring of it. How anybody can think otherwise is beyond me, actually. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Burnett, you wish to speak?
Yes, Mayor, I would. It's interesting after the comment I made earlier. I would actually ask Councillor Hodges to withdraw his comment that I have been a supporter of the biomass plant. I came into this council and planning permission was already in place. I work within the realms of policy for being a supporter of this plant, and I would not proactively support it. I just recognise policy and the frameworks within which we operate. I would appreciate it if Councillor Hodges would withdraw his remark.
Councillor Hodges, do you wish to comment? No comment coming.
Sorry, I'm struggling. I haven't got a camera, and my speech button doesn't work very well. It is true, these meetings are difficult. No, I won't withdraw it. You were quoted in the papers as saying it. It is a fact. You actually supported it in your role. You actually said it would create jobs. It's currently being stated as 8, by the way.
Thank you for that. And Leader, you wish to come in? You're muted, Leader.
Of course I am. Sorry. I don't want to say, if nobody's gonna talk about it, then it needs to be summed up. But we do have the barrister here. We do have our officers here, and I would remind people that would bring you back to what this resolution is about. It was about the resolution back in 2020, which asked for a review of the planning applications that had taken place. And that is what the review took place. Now, I think it was only incumbent upon the comments that had been made, whether or not the barrister wants to say anything and whether or not any officers wish to make any comments in relation to this. I've got some other comments to make at the end if I could, but I think it's only fair and proper that if we've got the barrister and officers available, then it's not unreasonable for tell us if they want to come in, they can. Otherwise, I will sum up.
Councillor King wishes to speak.
Mayor, can I just come in ever so quickly, please, on an administrative point? You have a motion and a seconder for the actual report to note and to endorse the review. And you also have another motion with a seconder from Councillor Johnson, seconded by Stefan William. I think loosely the wording was to reject the review.
Yes.
So I think we need to go to the amended motion first, if I'm correct. But I'd like if Councillor Johnson could repeat the precise wording of his motion, if that's possible.
Thank you, Managing Director. That Council rejects the review provided in its current form and requests further information from an appropriate source regarding whether or not the 2015 decision should have been a Schedule 1 EIA, and whether or not the current position is that the plant should be a DNS, Development of National Significance.
Could you repeat the last sentence, please, Councillor Johnson? It was very crackly.
And whether or not the plant as it currently is built should be regarded as a development of national significance.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for this motion?
Councillor Williams seconded me.
Yes.
Yes, it has
Stefan
been
Williams.
seconded.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to come in on that point to clarify where we are. It's a matter for members, if you will, now want to bring the barrister in or any officers. But I just wanted to flag up where we were. That's all in the debate. Thank you.
We have 4 members wishing to speak on this point. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues. I wasn't going to speak, but I'm a bit uncomfortable that comments have been made questioning the independence of the reviewer, and I would very much appreciate allowing her, if she wishes to speak, and specifically with the view that whether she felt that her brief or remit or whatever it was called was flawed in some way, or if indeed she felt that she was unable to conduct her review. Because the way that I've interpreted some of the comments made, it has impugned her and her review, and I feel really very, very uncomfortable if she is not given the opportunity to state her position on that.
Thank you, Councillor King. Director, you wish to come in? Rob?
Apologies, that was an old hand just on the administrative point from earlier. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Carroll?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to support Councillor Johnson's motion or amendment, or whatever the technical term would be on that. With regard to standing orders, I think that it is disappointing, especially that the review has not received the support of the Docks Incinerator Action Group DIAG, and I think that should be a red flag for all of us as members. They've worked exceptionally hard on this for many years. I'd like to pay tribute to them for the work that they've done and thank them for the information that they circulated to all of us in advance. I would, however, endorse Councillor King's comments about making things personal towards the reviewer who is kindly with us this evening. I would note that earlier in the debate we did have a discussion about security of members and those in public life. I do think it's important to bear that in mind, and I would hope that criticisms can be made and made in a justifiable way without getting into people's personalities. So I will do my best to make that distinction in my remarks, but I would be supporting Councillor Johnson's amendment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll.
I wish to raise a point of order, Madam Mayor. Can I move that the question be put?
The question be put. Leader?
I think that's probably premature, to be honest. And I wanted to speak on the amendment to be quite honest. And I also would think, and I agree, that Annabel Graham-Paul should have the opinion, have the option to talk to us as good officers.
Well, she hasn't done yet, Madam Mayor. She hasn't chosen to speak yet, and she was asked more than once to speak. Have I got a seconder for my motion that the question be put?
I think she's waiting to speak.
But I'm very happy to speak. I'm not sure of the procedure, if you wanted to invite me to speak, or I wasn't going to interrupt anybody. But if you would like me to speak on particular points that have been raised, then I'm very happy to do so. Okay. Right, I see some thumbs up there. Okay. So in relation to the scope of my instructions, and as I set out in the review, and as I explained at the 19th of October meeting as well, I was given electronic access to the planning files, but I wasn't instructed to carry out any type of inquiry in the sense as you might have with witnesses being called and giving evidence, and a full review with interviews with officers or anything like that. And that really was a matter for the local authority and the extent to which they wanted to spend public funds and a proportionality of it. But in my own opinion, I was content that I had sufficient information to be able to take a view as to whether the process had been lawful. So in a way that a court would look at it if somebody had challenged it at the time by way of judicial review. So I was looking at it on that sort of basis rather than a fully inquisitorial process with interviewing officers. But ultimately that comes down to the proportionality of the public purse. If members want a greater, a more, more intensive review, then that's something that can be called for. I'm not sure that it's necessary, particularly at this point in time, and given what's happened subsequently, in particular that an EIA is now being carried out. But that's obviously a matter for the council. In terms of the point about a finding as to whether it's Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 development, at the time of my review, which was in June 2020, I obviously had not had sight of the 29th of July letter from the Welsh Government. So I wasn't able to take that into account, but I did subsequently come back to it. And as I think has been said, it wasn't really for me to impose my own judgment as to whether it should be Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 development. I was looking at the decision-making process that had been carried out by officers and seeing if I thought there had been any misconduct or any maladministration, or it was unlawful in any way. And at the time I wrote my review, it was clear there was always a live debate as to whether it was Schedule 1 or Schedule 2, which I acknowledged. But I looked at the officer's reasoning as to why it was Schedule 2. I considered that it seemed decent reasoning, and I had no evidence at that point to the contrary. I did make some recommendations in terms of revisiting it along the stage, and I also criticised the fact that I felt too much reliance had been placed on the previous 2008 screening opinion. But as I say, it may well in hindsight now be right that it should have been treated as Schedule 1 development. But that doesn't mean that the officers were acting negligently or unlawfully in reaching the judgment that they did at the time. And I noted that at that time, the Welsh ministers had also considered this issue and had supported the Vale of Glamorgan officers. So they had gone out to the Welsh government and said, what's your view? It's a difficult issue. What's your view? And Welsh government have come back and said, we agree with you. We're not giving a determination, but we agree with you. So in my view, that being so, no court would ever say, well, that's, was obviously, a terrible mistake to have made. And yes, now we have a different view from the Welsh government, which may well be correct, but, we are where we are. So that was my position on whether it was Schedule 1, Schedule 2. The other point that has been raised, which I do note, and it's a newer point that has come in today, I think, and wasn't raised at the last meeting, was that the question that was being asked as to whether the development should be treated as a DNS is to be looked at now rather than as the position as it was. And if that's something that members do want to have advice on, then that's something that can be provided. So obviously, if there are things that haven't come out of the review that are still wanted, that members still want advice from, there's nothing to stop further advice being given. So it's really in your hands as to if there are further questions that need to be dealt with and how you wish to proceed on that, or if you wish to note the review that's been done and seek supplementary questions, or if you want to note the review and seek a completely new review with full oral evidence, interviews, and a much bigger budget for it. And that's obviously a matter for members.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And can I thank Annabel Paul for that, because that's why I wanted her to speak really. I think the reason that I've said to note this is because that is exactly what was requested of her, to review the planning applications, which she has done, and she's come to an opinion that you've all heard. It doesn't reflect on what happened at the time, because it is a matter of judgment and interpretation. And it was a matter of judgment and interpretation as to what pyrolysis, gasification or incineration was too. And my advice, the advice I was given and some of the things that I looked at the time was that it wasn't classed as incineration, and there's an article that says that. Now, opinions have changed since that time, for a lot since then, and I think you can reflect in hindsight. But what you have to remember is that in 2008, there was a lot of discussion as to whether or not it needed an EIA. The officer contacted Welsh Government. Welsh Government said it didn't. And that really has caused the issue more than anything else. Because in 2015, the same officer was minded of the same thing, went back to Welsh Government and said, do you think we need an EIA? I'm not convinced we do. They said, we agree with you, hence there wasn't one. Now, the problem with the 2015 application was there was no J on it. So it was where it was. So it continued as it was. But, and this is where we are, and to be honest, this will probably answer, I think, Councillor Johnson's question, is that as I understand it, and officers can away a year and they can correct me if I'm wrong, is that in 2015 the application was agreed, it wasn't JR'd, it hasn't been complied with at all, and there are too many discrepancies to deal with at the moment, and it does not comply with the original planning application that was agreed in July 2020, was agreed in 2015. Because it hasn't complied with that, it's now become invalid since I think July 2020, and technically, the planning application has actually lapsed anyway because they haven't completed all the things. Also, the issue in terms of the resolution was an enforcement notice has been issued. That has been appealed, as we all know, and it's now with the Welsh Government inspector. And it's also Welsh Government have now changed their mind and agreed that it should have had an EIA, and in hindsight, they probably should have done. And there's nobody arguing that more than anybody else. And let's be fair, nobody has ever said, yes, we want it there. I've never ever said that. In fact, I wrote loads of the leaflets opposing it in the first instance, and that's why we rejected it too originally. But once it was agreed, then we have to work within the framework. It's been appealed. Welsh Government are now going out to consultation. It's out on the out to that until the 17th of January. I don't think Welsh Government are going to make a decision on the EIA, and they've had all the information from the company, and it isn't for as Councillor Marnie seems to think, is for us to go out and find the EIA statement. It's not. It's for the company to provide it themselves. So if the EIA is agreed or not agreed, it makes no difference, because at this juncture, to be honest, because the plant is not built as required of the 2015 application, which means it needs a new application, which the applicants will not progress. And the reason they won't progress is because it is absolutely a DNS now, without any shadow of a doubt. In 2015, it couldn't have been a DNS because the legislation wasn't there. The legislation is now there, and in my mind, it would definitely be a DNS application. Hence, if that is the case, it would be for Welsh Government to deal with, and not the council anyway. So we're left as it is with an application in 2015, which is in some respects academic now because it now has lapsed. And I will ask officers to confirm this just to make sure I am not confused on it. And that what's built needs to have a new application if they wish to put it in. They haven't. They're going down the appeal process, and they're hoping, obviously, that the Welsh Government will agree that an EIA is or is not agreed. And basically, if they say an EIA is not agreed, because they've made an appeal on a ground A appeal, which means if the determination of the appeal is granted, it automatically is granted as it stands, probably without conditions. So as I understand it, because we've now had the enforcement notice is valid, it's appealed, it's now totally in the hands of the Welsh Government. Now, to go back to 2008 and 2015, there was a hell of a lot of confusion. There was a judgment and interpretations made, and obviously, if it was made today, it probably wouldn't be made the same way. It was never JR'd, so we are stuck with that application. So I see it as this 15 application is not valid unless Welsh Government agree it through the appeal process. and Mayor, I would like to have clarification through the officers whether I'm right or wrong, because I think I'm right, but who knows?
Can we get clarification on this point for the leader, please?
Okay. Is it okay if I speak now? Mayor, is that okay? It's Marcus Goldsworth, the Head of Planning and Regeneration. So the issues raised by the leader in respect of the application are correct in as much as the application was approved in July 2015 and therefore would last for 5 years if not implemented, and that would mean it would expire in the 30th of July 2020. There is significant differences between what was built and what was approved in July 2015. Those differences include a large external conveyor, the handling of the building in terms of its design, with openings being mirror imaged. So what is built is a mirror image of actually what was approved. Other items of equipment such as a fire water tank and number of generators. And one of the key differences being that the site is actually larger than was originally approved. So the edge red site is larger and includes additional parking. There remains some uncertainty as to whether that is significant enough to mean that the consent has not been implemented, but it is enough of a concern for officers to have led to the position where the enforcement notice was authorised and served, so that it protects the position of the council should the position B, that after 4 years of having erected it, it would become lawful. That won't happen now because the enforcement notice has been served. On just a couple of other issues, just for clarification, it's important to note that going back to 2008, when the original biomass plant application was submitted, that application was for a pyrolysis plant, as has been mentioned before. Those are, in terms of the advice given by both Natural Resources Wales, who didn't exist in 2008, but the Environment Agency that did, and indeed DEFRA, who are for the UK, the governing body on those matters, they are considered different to incineration, and that remains the point and remains legally the position. In 2008, Welsh Government actually issued a direction to this council advising that an firstly, that environmental impact assessment was required, and then a revocation of that direction, advising that an environmental impact assessment wasn't required. The reason given for that revocation was that they had assessed the process involved in that at that time, which was pyrolysis, and advised that that was not considered to be incineration in the terms of the environmental impact assessment regulations. They advised in the letter that they sent to this council that the environmental impact assessment regulations did not define incineration, although referring to it as a term in Schedule 1 of the legislation, and therefore went through a process of determining whether or not that process identified would fall within that class, and they decided it did not, and that Schedule 2, which is the schedule that it was assessed against, was the correct class. As the leader has correctly pointed out, when the application came back in 2015 as an amended application to that previous approval, that application again was made on the advising that it was not an incineration process, but a gasification process, which is often classed with pyrolysis. That process, once again, and that issue was raised with Welsh Government, and it's important to note the Welsh Government, yet again, categorically, just before the determination of this application, actually provided a letter advising they were not going to issue a direction, that they were of the same opinion as they had made in 2008, and therefore that the EIA was not required in as much as the council had been through the correct process under Schedule 2. I think it's fair to say that at that time it would have been a very brave officer to recommend that it still required an EIA when the authority that was the senior authority in that regard, because you have to remember that Welsh Government have the ability to call in any application if it feels that it needs to do so, and in particular with regard to environmental impact regulations, they have those powers at any time the application is being determined. So it would have been a particularly brave officer to actually have said that no, we don't agree with any of this. They've gone through that process and they're wrong, and although they're the senior authority in this regard, we are going to continue to advise that an EIA is necessary. So it was against that backdrop that the final decision was taken that an EIA wasn't required, and indeed that the decision of the councillors of the planning committee was taken. It has taken Welsh Government since 2018, when they issued a letter originally saying they were minded and concerned that possibly an EIA was required. It has taken them until 2021 to issue a letter where they say that actually, on reconsidering the whole matter, they consider that an EIA is required. Now, the key thing here, and I know it's been mentioned by a lot of members, is around this term incineration. And the fact of the matter is that legally the definition is very, very blurred. People are taught, and I have read the DIAG letter, I've read the references in there, and the big issue is that the definition of incineration is not included in the environmental impact regulations, and therefore you're drawing a definition from other pieces of legislation unrelated to planning. So I just wanted to hammer home that fact that it's not a straightforward matter. It's a matter that's taken considerable time to be thought about. It was a matter which, indeed, at the time of those previous planning applications, caused vex both this council and indeed Welsh Government. So while it does sound with hindsight to be really straightforward, that was not the case, and that was not where we got. So I think I'll end it there, but if anyone's got any specific questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Marcus. Councillor Marnie, you indicated you wish to speak. Do you have questions?
Yes, thank you. Only briefly. It was actually leading up to that. I stand to be corrected, but I don't think I can't recall anybody suggesting that the barrister wasn't independent or competent for that matter. I don't think anybody that I've heard have suggested that her review isn't correct. I think the point people have been making, or certainly I've been making, is that it wasn't the right review. And if we vote against this, we're not saying that the barrister wasn't independent, nor competent, nor correct in her findings, but that the ethical and moral aspect hasn't been addressed. And as I think I said in my earlier submission, is that she can only go on the heads of agreement that she was told to carry out the review on. So I'm quite staggered that somebody suggested that somebody else has said that the barrister wasn't independent. Maybe that could be clarified by the person making those claims. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Marnie. Rob, if you wish to come in on this now.
Yeah, I just want to add to what the head of Planning and Regeneration said earlier, Mayor, if I could, and that is to just explain where we are currently with this. Members are probably aware that we have served an enforcement notice on the basis that the as-built development does not comply with the 2015 planning permission. Indeed, the view is at the moment that there are so many discrepancies with the 2015 permission that what has been built on site cannot be taken to constitute that development that was approved in 2015. So as a consequence, because planning permissions run for 5 years, if the development is found to be that different so that it is not seen to be an implementation of the 2015 planning permission, the view would be taken that that permission has lapsed and there is no planning permission left to rely on. Now, that is something that will clearly be the subject of communication and correspondence in due course, I suspect. But because the council has served an enforcement notice, the current position as I understand it, and Marcus Goldsworthy will correct me if this is incorrect, but I understand that a Ground A planning appeal has been issued against the enforcement notice. Now, a Ground A planning appeal is, to put it simply, that planning permission should be granted for that development that the council has enforced against. So because a Ground A appeal is progressing at the moment, the environmental impact assessment that's being prepared by the developer and that is now subject to consultation by Welsh Government will in effect serve to support that Ground A appeal. The leader has already said that that environmental assessment is being consulted upon at the moment, and I think the date 17th of January was mentioned as the cut-off. Once that consultation run its course, and that's a Welsh Government consultation, it's not a Vale Glamorgan Council consultation, Welsh Government will take a view on that environmental assessment, and the planning appeal, or the enforcement notice appeal rather, under Ground A will be considered by Welsh Government. Welsh Government will then take a view as to whether to, or the planning inspector, the independent planning inspector appointed by Welsh Government, will have to take a view as to whether that Ground A appeal should succeed or not. If it does succeed, then as a matter of course, planning permission is then granted for what has been built on site. If that Ground A appeal fails, then planning permission won't be granted and the enforcement notice will stand. We will then have a position where the development that is as built on site, the council would argue, does not have the benefit of planning permission for two reasons. One reason being that the appeal has failed, and the second reason being that the time that has passed since the 2015 planning permission was granted is such that that cannot any longer be implemented. I think it's important that everyone remembers that, because that takes us a lot further down the road than where we were when the review was called for. We have clarity that we've served an enforcement notice. We have clarity that an appeal has been submitted. We have clarity that an environmental assessment has been prepared by the developer and that has been consulted upon by Welsh Government to assess whether it is sufficient or not. And the next course of action will be for Welsh Government to assess that appeal and to assess whether the council was right in serving an enforcement notice, or whether indeed the development as built should be granted planning permission by virtue of the Ground A appeal. I just wanted to surmise the current position because I think it's important that we are aware of that, given that we are in a very different position, as I say, from when the review was called for. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Williams, Edward Williams, want to come in?
If you don't mind, Mayor, can I allow Marcus to return, please, before I speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Just to add to what Rob has said, and the subject of an appeal, and actually because it is a Ground A appeal, that is a planning application, just to confirm that, and the applicants have had to pay the full planning fee for that to happen again. One final point of note is that it's almost certainly that will have to be considered as a development of national significance, or as in the way it would be considered. If you look at it logically, a development of national significance would be considered by the Planning Inspectorate, or PEDU, as they are now known, the Welsh Planning Inspectorate, and therefore it will be considered in that way. So the questions about whether it would be a development of national significance are largely irrelevant. It will now be considered by the body that would take that decision in any event. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you very much for that, Marcus. And Eddie, Councillor Williams, you want to come in now?
Thank you, Leader. I do appreciate the conversation and discussion tonight, and particularly of the report and the reviewers' comments. The situation we got before us tonight is this particular report, and I think one of the discussion points that have been brought up is the EIA, and whether it's valid or not. The point I would need to make is that just because there is an EIA doesn't mean that planning application would be refused. The EIA might actually say that it's environmentally acceptable. So that's the first point I wanted to make, that regardless, the enforcement piece is the key part that we're in at the moment. And as the manager, director and head of service just explained, that process needs to follow through. And so that we'll get an outcome of that, and we'll get a better outcome, and knowing where the situation is with the current planning development as is. We'll also get the Welsh Government view, and therefore I think we should wait on that. So therefore my view on this report that we got with us tonight, it's what we've asked for. Now I recognise that it doesn't satisfy all members of the council, because in short, I do believe the answer they want is that we're not having a biomass plant, or whatever you want to call it. But the fact is that that's not what the review was asking for, and I don't think that was the intention in the initial question. I don't really want to go into the ins and outs of the justification of the review. We spent enough time on this as is. I would just ask members to accept what this report has given us, note it as we've asked for. And then if at a later date we want further information, when we're in a better situation with more knowledge, because if we put an amendment in tonight, we're basing it on something that's going to happen, and we haven't got the full information. So we're going to make a judgment or decision on something which is, in my view, a waste of taxpayers' money. We can bring this back. We can ask for a further report, but we'll know what the outcome of the enforcement and appeal is. So I ask members, and my view is that we should support the motion that's been brought forward by the leader. Any other motion is, a motion that disagrees with the actual report shouldn't even be allowed, because that in effect is a refusal. So I don't understand why that's, as a point of order, why that's been accepted as a motion, but I'll leave that up to better people than me. So I just thought I'd put that view across. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Andrew Robertson.
Thank you, Lady Mayoress. I just wanted to say that I'm very concerned to hear that Marcus thinks this might become the subject of development of national importance. I'm very concerned about the whole process of developments of national importance, the lack of democracy, the lack of scrutiny. This is a new system which has been brought in by the Welsh Government, by which large-scale projects can be pushed forward by the Welsh Government and actually passed without any democratic process at all. It goes straight to the inspectorate of the Welsh Government. The Welsh Government inspectorate make the decisions, and these decisions are not actually being scrutinised in any way at all. It's very concerning, and I just want to really bring to the attention of my fellow councillors that if this becomes a DNI, Diag are in trouble.
Thank you for that, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Wilkinson, you wish to come in on this?
Yeah, I wasn't going to speak, but I'm getting slightly confused. I thought we were moving a report that we asked for. Why are we going into all this planning? That is to come later, to me. But I thought we asked for someone to look into it. We've got the report. That is what we're voting on tonight, the report, nothing else. I'm getting a bit confused. I know sometimes I do, but I thought we were looking just at the report that we asked for. Nothing, and everything else, planning and all this other stuff from the Welsh Assembly is going to come after January. So can we please just think about the report?
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Leader, can you recap, please, on the motion in front of us? I know we're going to have, Rob, you wish to come in?
I just wanted to clarify the point that Councillor Wilkinson just raised, because what we have is a motion to accept the report and a motion to, in effect, reject the report. So I would suggest that probably on advice of the monitoring officer, and I don't know if she agrees with me, but Councillor Johnson's motion probably negates the original motion from the leader, which is written in the report in front of you. So on that basis, it seems like it's a vote for or against. But happy to be corrected on that if the monitoring officer thinks that Councillor Johnson's motion goes actually further than what the report says.
Yes, I mean, Councillor Johnson did add to the initial part of his amendment, which was to reject, and added a reference to seeking further information from an appropriate source, and also making reference to whether it was a development of national significance. Certainly the point with regards to development of national significance appears to have been dealt with by the officers and the barrister, but there are those additional points to Councillor Johnson's amendment. So unless Councillor Johnson is satisfied on those points, then we're dealing with a direct vote for and against. It would still stand as an amendment to the motion. And I can see Councillor Johnson has his hand up.
Councillor Johnson, you wish to come back?
Yes, I mean, thank you very much to the monitoring officer. I think probably for the benefit of simplicity tonight, I'd like the comments that I've made obviously noted with regards to the fact that I think that it is important to actually have an opinion on whether it should have been Schedule 1 and where we are with it being a development of national significance. Those are perhaps out with the the narrow points of this as a report. So I think it would be cleaner and simpler if that is withdrawn, subject to my seconder agreeing with that, and then we have a straight vote.
Thank you for that. And your seconder was Councillor Willam, I believe.
Reluctantly, I'll agree to that, but I do think that all this pussyfooting around is quite contemptible. And the fact is, I'm finding a lot of the conversations tonight incredibly disingenuous. And there's a big elephant in the room, and it's all about having a proper EIA and not one that has been concocted by a company in collusion with people who just want to make sure that they give nice answers that are convenient, which will allow the development to go ahead. That's what's really going on here. And I find it appalling that we as a council aren't really tackling this head on. So reluctantly, yes, I will concede to withdrawing.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Rob, you wish to come in?
I just wanted simply to say, give Councillor Johnson some comfort that because the matter is now before Welsh Government on a ground A appeal against the enforcement notice, Welsh Government will have to make a judgment as to whether the development is a development of national significance or not, and they will deal with it accordingly, depending on whether its scale is such that it is a DNS or a development of national significance. And I'd also like to, whilst I've got the floor, give Councillor Williams some comfort as well, that an EIA is always prepared by a developer. So if an application is submitted, and I'm mindful of what Councillor Marnie said earlier about this council preparing an EIA, it's always, I think I'm correct in saying, well, it's normal practice then, put it like that an EIA is prepared to support a development proposal put forward by an applicant for planning permission. So we would not, as an organisation, normally prepare an EIA that is independent of any development proposal. That is always something that is done to support a planning application that's been submitted by a developer. And the enforcement notice that has been served and the ground A appeal that has been submitted now makes it clear that an EIA has to be prepared and consulted upon to support that process, as I said earlier.
Thank you, Rob. The leader wishes to speak. Just
a point of information, though, Madam Chair, if I may, I would like to thank Rob for his comments. And I'm fully aware that the applicant has to make the EIA. My problem is with the way that the EIA has been made, and I have severe doubts about the way it's been made. But that does not reflect on this council.
Thank you for that, Councillor William. Leader, you wish to come in on this?
I think Marcus wants to just make a comment, I think, before I do sum up.
Marcus, would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was really quickly, in addition to what Rob said, yes, he is correct. Usually the developer the developer who makes the application submits it. But the other point to note is that in a lot of cases, we would sometimes employ agents or consultants to look at that report for us and advise whether the environmental impact assessment is acceptable. In this particular case, Welsh Government have done exactly the same. They've employed consultants to look at this EIA, and indeed that's the reason it's taken so long, as I understand it, is that the consultants advised the developers they had not put enough information in around certain areas, and they had to go away and redo it. And that is the reason that it's come back. And when it does come back to Welsh Government, as I understand it, those consultants will advise further on it. So it is a three-way process in many ways, although you do have the developer submitting the environmental impact assessment, often by a consultant on their behalf. There is always usually an assessment of that, sometimes in our case, by Natural Resources Wales, who act as our agents, but often by a consultant appointed. So just to give some clarity and some comfort there.
Thank you for that, Marcus. Leader, do you want to wind up?
Yes, please. I would like to wind up. Can I thank Councillor Johnson for withdrawing the amendment, because I think that's why I wanted to speak and give him some of the information, because I think that was what he's after. Can I thank the barrister and Belgreen Paul for being here and giving their views. I think, we asked her to do a job. She's done a job. Therefore, I think that's where we are. Can I thank the officers for just clarifying the situation too? And can we just move it to a vote? And I don't see anything. It's either simply a straight of voting for it or against it, I think, Madam Mayor. So thank you very much.
Thank you. About a seconder for that.
think Councillor Burnett has already seconded.
Yes. Yes, Madam. Yes, Mayor, I already seconded it right at the start. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And on that note, that is agreed. We will move on.
We need
to proceed to the vote.
I'm sorry.
There was a recorded vote called for.
They wanted a recorded vote.
Yeah. We still want a recorded vote. Thank you.
Unless they want to withdraw it, of course, but I don't think they will.
Are we going with a recorded vote or?
Yeah, Mayor, that was agreed earlier. So, with your permission, Mayor, if I can ask members to specify after I call out their names whether they are for or against the report as presented and the recommendations within the report, which is, in summary, to note, I think, to note the independent review report. So I'll start with Councillor Julie Aviett, please.
For.
Councillor Vince Bailey.
Against.
Councillor Rhiannon Birch.
For.
Councillor Jonathan Bird.
For.
Councillor Bronwyn Brooks.
For.
Councillor Liz Burnett.
For.
Councillor George Carroll.
Against.
Councillor Christine Cave.
Against.
Councillor Janice Charles.
Against.
Councillor Jeff Cox.
For.
Councillor Robert Crowley.
Against.
Councillor Andrew R.T. Davis.
Against.
Councillor Pamela Drake.
For.
Councillor Vince Driscoll.
Against.
Councillor Stuart Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Ben Gray.
For.
Councillor Owen Griffiths.
For.
Councillor Stephen Griffiths.
Against.
Councillor Sally Hanks.
For.
Councillor Nick Hodges.
Against.
Councillor Hunter Jarvie.
For.
Councillor Gwyn John.
For.
Councillor Ian Johnson.
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Gordon Kemp.
Against.
Councillor Peter King.
For.
Councillor Kevin Marnie.
Against.
Councillor Catherine McCaffer.
For.
Councillor Anne Moore.
Sorry, it's good again. Sorry.
Sorry, for.
Councillor Neil Moore.
Apologies, that mic was off. For.
Councillor Michael Morgan.
For.
Councillor Jane Norman.
For.
Councillor Rachel Nugent-Finn.
Against.
Councillor Andrew Parker.
For.
Councillor Bob Penrose.
Against.
Councillor Sandra Perks.
For.
Councillor Andrew Robertson.
Against.
Councillor Leighton Rowlands.
Against.
Councillor Ruba Sivanianam.
For.
Councillor John Thomas.
For.
Councillor Neil Thomas.
For.
Councillor Steffan William.
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Margaret Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor Eddie Williams.
For.
Councillor Mark Wilson.
For.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the recorded vote, and I make that 26 for, 18 against.
Yes, I agree.
So the report is carried, Mayor.
Thank you very much. And we can move on.
Yes, Madam Mayor, can I thank the barrister if she wants to leave us up to her, no?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. And yes, I will leave the meeting now. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, good. Okay, the next item is a reference from Cabinet on the 22nd of November in relation to the County Borough of the Vale, Glamorgan and Electoral Arrangements Order 2021. I think we are all aware of the situation. it was recommended that the County Borough of Vale Glamorgan election arrangements order which was attached to the report at Appendix be noted, and that the consequential electoral ward boundaries be noted, and the Cabinet be recommended to approve the revision of the polling districts as detailed in Report B, but with one change in that I think there was a reference JGO at Appendix C was an error and should be deleted. I think unless anybody really wants to go into any detail, I think it's been everywhere. It's a reference also from corporate performance. We'll consider it. So can I formally move, please?
And formally second, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
there's no objections. Can we move on to 10D, which is polling places, very similar, and polling stations reviews. This was again reported to corporate performance and back to Cabinet on the 22nd of November. The report proposes the changes to the polling places and/or polling stations as set out in the report. And I think there's nothing more to say other than there was an amendment in terms of the Glamorgan in Caddock Ward, where there will be 2 polling stations instead of, well, there will be 2 separate stations instead of 1 combined one. I think that's correct. So can I formally move? I think everybody's had time to deal with this anyway.
And formally second, Mayor.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any comments? No.
The next item is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report. It went to Cabinet on the 22nd of November. I can talk to it if you want. Obviously, things like, for example, the Treasury management activity of the Council included COVID-19 as continued impact on the economies across the world. In the UK, interest rates have remained low, etc. But cut to the chase, unless people really want me to go through this report, what I'm recommending is that the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report for the period 1st of April to 30th September 2021 be endorsed, that the latest Treasury Management indicators be noted, that the reference, the report, it was forwarded to corporate performance anyway. We noted that the changes to the investment limits be noted, because that was about changes to the way that we either borrow or invest money. And I can go through it if you want, but basically we're using, we're having investments with local authorities, the Debt Management Office, the Treasury bills, money market funds, and we also carried out an instant access account with Lloyds Bank. There was another issue in terms of this, and it was also proposed to extend the maturity period of loans to other local authorities from 365 days to 2 years. That's basically just giving a bit more time. So the further recommendation was that the increase, so we note the changes to the investment limits because they're slightly changed within the report, and that the increase in the maximum maturity period for investments be placed with other local authorities be 2 years, with a maximum investment of £5 million per institution and no more than £10 million invested beyond the 365 days.
John Thomas.
Beyond 365
is now exiting
by full council. So it's come to council for acceptance. I will go through it, but you've all heard it before, and I hope that everybody accepts it. Can I formally move?
And formally second, Mayor.
Thank you. Is that agreed? I think so. Ian, yeah.
There doesn't seem to be anything coming of it, so I think that is agreed.
Well, that's good. Thank you very much. The next items, Madam Mayor, are the items 11A, B, C, which are to inform Council of the use of urgent decision procedure under Article 1414 of the Constitution. We did also use one in terms of the council tax reduction scheme, which was reported earlier. I think Ian wants to come in.
I was just going to say, have we done 10F, Madam Mayor?
No.
I was going to say exactly the same thing.
Right. You're absolutely right, which is why I just talked about 1414. I'm sorry. Thank you, Ian. Basically, approval is sought to confirm the re-adoption of the council tax reduction national scheme for 22-23. It's something which we have to do by the 31st of January, hence the reason we took it to Cabinet with the 1414 recommendation. It's there to adopt the scheme again this year. It requires a full council. Basically, it's the same thing as we normally do. Is that we recommend that the council tax reduction scheme and prescribed recommend requirements, Wales regulations, which the prescribed requirement regulations and the council tax reduction schemes, the prescribed requirements and default schemes, Wales amendment regulations be adopted again, that any amendments to regulations made by the Welsh Government are reflected in the scheme, that the national scheme be adopted in the following discretions, which, as I said, are the same as normal, that the council should continue to allow extended payments up to a maximum of 4 weeks, that the council should continue to disregard war widows and war disablement pensions in assessing income for council tax reduction schemes, that the council should continue to allow backdated reductions for a period of up to 26 weeks. And as I say, we already used the 1414 recommendation to bring it here because we have to agree it before the 31st of January, as we do each year. Thank you, Ian, for pointing out my error. Can I formally move, please?
And formally second, Mayor.
John Thomas
is now joining.
Thank you.
That is agreed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Now go to item number 11, Leader.
We'll now go to item number 11, A, B, and C, and can I formally move them as an urgent item as we already been taken, please?
And formally second, Mayor.
Don't seem to be any comments on that, so that is agreed.
Thank you.
Right, and we move on to the questions. We have a few. The first one is number one is from Councillor Morgan to the Cabinet Member for Housing and Building Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Morgan. There are currently 10 council properties vacant in the rural Vale. Of these are 4 undergoing minor repairs to relet again. Of the remaining 6, 5 are long-term voids, which include the non-standard area homes in St George's and a vacancy in Pendoilem, a void pending major structural repairs. The 4 aerial construction type properties in Castle Green, St George's, Super Ely are on hold pending option appraisals. Extensive works due to non-traditional house buildings. Whilst it had been intending to, we were thinking of demolishing and rebuild these homes, significant increases building cost has caused the council to review the finance viability of these projects. Officers are currently reviewing the cost and options to establish the best solution for these properties. The review will be conducted shortly and the affected tenants will be consulted on the outcome of those reviews.
Thank you for that, Councillor. No supplementary, we move on.
Supplementary coming up, if you don't mind me.
Supplementary coming.
Really just to have some idea of time scale on this, because I'm aware of the cost implications. These have been explained to me before. I'm sorry.
So somebody's microphone's not muted, so can you mute your microphones, please?
Really, can you confirm a timescale on when these work can be done? And could the message be carried back to the officers involved, that the needs of the people who rely on local authority accommodation in the rural Vale and the villages should be given the same priority as those living in the urban areas, because these houses have now been empty for over 2 years, and there are people who have been displaced and there are people who need them. So I'm really asking to go back and say, can we get on with this work, please?
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. I have been in contact with the 2 tenants that want to go back, and we are talking to them, and they are having a meeting this Thursday, I believe, on the 9th, to go through their options. The work is now really gone up in price because the person that put the tenants in the first time, they have gone into liquidation. Oh, what's the word? Well, they're bankrupt. Or something like that. And we've had to go out and retender, and the price that's come in is tripled. So we are looking at what is the best way forward for these tenants, and they are now going to be engaging with our officers to really see what's the best issue for them. 2 only want to come back, the others don't. So is there any, I will speak to the officers again, but I do know this is ongoing, and I have spoken to the tenants myself, and they're having a meeting on Thursday.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Question number 2 is from Councillor Ian Johnson to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. In answer to your question, I can advise that various options are still being considered regarding the provision of appropriate crossing facilities at this important junction. As you will probably be aware, all roads leading to Gladstone Road Bridge are identified on the Council's draft Active Travel Network map, ATM-NM, that is due to be submitted to Welsh Government later this month. These include the following active travel routes: Vale SPR Future 016C Gladstone Road Bridge, Vale SPR Future 013A Broad Street to Gladstone Road, Vale SPR Future 013B Gladstone Road, and Vale SPR Future 014B Holton Road to Gladstone Road. Further details of these can be found on the Council's website or by contacting the Council's Active Travel Officer. As each of these schemes are developed, crossing facilities for pedestrians and cyclists will then be considered.
Thank you, Councillor. Supplementary?
Yes, thank you very much to the Cabinet for that response. As an able-bodied person, even I find it difficult and terrifying crossing around Gladstone Road Bridge. The speed of vehicles leaving the particular speed of vehicles leaving the roundabout as they speed up is quite distressing. Can I ask? I know this was discussed previously within the Barry Town Centre West Gateway scheme a few years ago, but has not been progressed. Can I ask that this is prioritised within future capital projects to ensure the safety of residents, because to link the waterfront, the West End of Barry and the town centre makes this a major thoroughfare. Thank you.
I certainly have every sympathy with what you've said, Councillor, and I will certainly take on board those comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. Next question is from Councillor Ian Johnson, the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Thank you again, Mayor and Councillor Johnson. The Section 19 reports relating to the recent flooding in Dinas Powys and Sully are available on the Council's website. Both reports provide records of the incidents in December 2020 and advise of the recommended actions for the various risk management agencies. Currently, the proposed actions are being considered together with their associated cost benefits. The Council has already undertaken a number of actions in Dinas Powys and Sully, including cleansing of the highway drainage system and obtaining information regarding the flooding from the residents affected. In terms of further actions this winter, the primary action for the Council is to deliver a property level protection PLP scheme for Sully as lead local flood authority. In addition, last month, Welsh Government granted funding for surveys and a business case to be progressed by the Council in conjunction with the responsible agency, NRW, for possible property level protection for up to 200 affected properties in Dinas Powys. Working with the local communities, our emergency planning officers have developed a community flood plan guidance document aimed at improving community self-resilience. The document advises how local communities can best prepare themselves for flooding and is aimed at providing improved protection for life and property. Our officers remain committed to continuing their work to support all communities affected by flood risk, but there needs to be a recognition that the community themselves must also play their part in such matters as the effects of climate change become more and more challenging. With that in mind, while sandbags are no longer available from Court Road, very, very shortly we will have them available from the docks office, which in my view might be a little bit more accessible. And we continue to work with the local community councils to identify a location where sandbags can be stored in a local and accessible location.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
So thank you much for that detailed response. With regards to emergency plans for the winter, where do we stand in terms of planning for officer availability and social services support for vulnerable people should flash flooding occur again in the Vale?
I think it's probably best that I actually go back to officers and get you a detailed response for that, Councillor, if you'll allow me to do so.
I'm very happy for with written response, Councillor King, and obviously I'd hope that also be sent to all councillors at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Question number 4, again from Councillor Johnson, to Cabinet Member for Legal, Regulatory and Planning Services.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. This question is regard to the County Treasurer's list and what plans do we have to review it. Given the extensive amount of work associated with the development of the County Treasurer's list, and the fact that this work was mainly focused on older properties of architectural historic merit, it's not currently considered that there is a need to review the County Treasurer's list at this time. The justification for that is that the inclusion of locally listed buildings in County Treasurer's list does not have any immediate effect in law, and they are not currently subject to any additional planning controls over alteration or demolition. I recognise that, whilst I recognise these are buildings of merit in the Vale of Glamorgan that are not identified as county treasures, just placing these on a local list would not afford any legal protection against demolition or damage. But since the list adoption, the Council has also adopted its local development plan. Policy SP10 and LDP requires development proposals to, amongst other things, preserve and, where appropriate, enhance the architectural and/or historic qualities of buildings and conservation areas, including locally listed buildings. The policy can be broadly interpreted to include all buildings of architectural or historic interest, even when they are not included in the national or local list.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you to the Cabinet Member for that response. Personally, I believe that Barry faces a heritage emergency, and there are a large number of important buildings that have been lost to us in recent time since 2007, when the county's treasures list was put together. I'm disappointed that the Cabinet Member doesn't feel that it's worth conducting a review to update the list. Will he please, though, write to Welsh Government and ask for additional protection for buildings of merit within places which are not currently within the Great Academy listed scheme, as that might help us to provide ways and means of maintaining our heritage, which otherwise might be lost.
Yeah, I recognise the challenges we've got, but as I've indicated in my answer, there is planning, law and policy that can protect us on that. It's for us to sort of recognise that and make sure that happens, and we as local ward members can notify the planning officers to deal with that. You recognise that this list that was generated was produced in 2007, and we can put greater controls in using the existing powers, which we've already done under Article 4 for the Town and Country Plan General Permitted Development Order 1995. And, you know, the council have recently, as you're aware, served an Article 4 direction removing permitted development rights relating to demolition of Christchurch Presbyterian and Tenwood Road in Barry. So I'm hoping that, you know, it's not a blanket statement that there isn't any protection. It's just, you know, something that we are doing as a council, but we need to be more alert to make sure that we utilise that article for future. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, councillors. Question 5 from Councillor Johnson to the Cabinet Member of Housing and Building Services.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. This is a very subject that people like to know about. The Nationality and Border Bill will have a dimension impact on refugees who arrive in the Vale of Glamorgan through the regular resettlement scheme, including Afghan refugees. The Council will continue to monitor its progress through Parliament and consult with the Welsh Structural Migration Partnership and the Home Office to fully understand the I can't say that word. In particular, they are very close to what's going on. We are also engaging with colleagues in the WLGA and working through the WLGA on these issues. It is expected that those who arrive through the Home Office scheme will continue to benefit from the services which have been put in place to promote integration into our communities, including languages, training and employment support.
Supplementary, Mayor? Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was still muted. I do apologise, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much to the Cabinet Member for her response there. Obviously, the Nationality and Borders Bill substantially undermines the Welsh Government's Nation of Sanctuary pledges and the Council's own good intentions. Welsh Refugee Council have described it as cruel and punitive. Will the Cabinet Member write to the UK and Welsh Government to express concerns about the impact of the bill away from Republican legislation, and also remind those in power of the need to help people under the Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme?
I will get you a written answer, but I will talk to the partnerships and people that's involved in the Vale Glamorgan Council with this, and I'll get you a written answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. And question number 6 is from Councillor Nugent Finn to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport. You're muted, councillor.
There's some rule of thumb about at least 4 people have to do it every hour. I can advise that the thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Nugent Finn. I can advise that the recent playground inspections of the Criabol play area at Pencoitra Village, the Dobbins Road play area in Palmerston and the Western Square play area were all satisfactory with no urgent works required. The Hale Libran play area at Pencoitra Village, which is in the Gibbonsdown ward, was also found to be in a satisfactory condition. There is currently no funding available from Section 106 or the main annual asset renewal budget for these playgrounds for 2021 to 22. And unfortunately, there are other facilities that are in a poorer condition than these, such as, for example, the Knapp Skate Park. Even though our own funding options are extremely limited, officers continue to investigate all possible external funding streams for outdoor play area improvements, but such funding would have to be prioritised if received. In the absence of the necessary funding to refurbish our older play area, I would reassure you that our officers will continue to inspect and maintain them to ensure that they remain safe to use.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nugent Finn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much, Councillor King. Really reassured that obviously there's going to be continual inspections as well. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Could you just explain to me how St David's Crescent in Penarth was funded, as well as Bellevue area in Penarth? They're having some significant investment and upgrade. Could you just tell me where that funding's come from, please, Councillor King?
Well, from memory, it was a bit of Section 106, but you asked me about Caddock, so I went to some trouble to look into Caddock and even strayed into neighbouring wards. So I think the best thing is I actually go and research that and come back to you. You just remind me, that was St David's and Bellevue, is it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Councillor King.
Thank you, Councillor King. Thank you, Councillor Nugent-Finn. Question 7 is again from Councillor Nugent-King to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Nugent-Finn. I can advise that council officers are liaising closely with Welsh Government and their consultants, TfW, to keep updated on any potential change in the default speed limit in Wales from 30 miles an hour to 20 miles per hour. Any exceptions as to where 20 mile an hour default speed limits might be delivered within the Vale is still under detailed consideration based on specific criteria and mapping produced by Welsh Government. The date for implementation of the default 20 mile an hour speed limit is currently May 23, 2023, subject to Welsh Government passing the necessary legislation. However, in short, all current 30 mph A and B class roads within the Vale of Glamorgan will be considered for change to 20 mph in accordance with that specified criteria, and a further detailed assessment including Cardiff Road, where it is currently 30 mile an hour speed limit. Further details on the 20 mph speed limit rollout can be found on the Welsh Government website. I will be providing reports to Cabinet and the relevant scrutiny committees as soon as there is a need for any executive decision on this matter, but currently this is some time away.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Nugent-Finn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor King. No supplementary. That's a full explanation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And question number 8, so again from Councillor Nugent-Finn to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you again, Councillor Nugent-Finn. As you will know, a gateway enhancement scheme was implemented by the Council in December 2020, as requested by Councillors Neil and Anne Moore, who are also Caddock councillors, mostly to encourage compliance with the speed limit entering the 30 mph section of Cardiff Road, Barry. The Belisha beacons at the zebra on Cardiff Road, Barry, were also upgraded to the Zebrite beacons in 2017-18. These ultra-visible halos, their ultra-visible halos make the crossings highly visible in all light conditions to oncoming traffic. At the same time, all road markings were refreshed. As far as I am aware, unfortunately, none of the 3 personal injury collisions, PICs, during the latest 5-year period, 100 metres either side of the zebra crossing, involved pedestrians. All schools in the Vale are offered curbcraft and cycling proficiency training from our road safety team, so that road safety is promoted and encouraged in children from a young age. Further to this, a public consultation on a proposed active travel route for Cardiff Road was held between the 15th of September to the 20th of October 2021. 279 responses were received through an online survey, 3 responses via email, as well as comments from the 2 ward members, Councillors Neil and Anne Moore. Of those that responded, 68% think that the plans to improve active travel route in this area are positive. The results are currently being analysed and a consultation report is being written with a decision as to whether to apply for full funding in the scheme to be made in January 2022.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Nugent-Finn.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks again, Councillor King. Could I just ask, similarly to Councillor Johnson, that any and all plans really are expedited with regards to, public safety, pedestrians, residents and motorists, actually. This is a major concern, and aligned with Councillors Anne and Neil Moore. This is a tremendous issue that does need to be looked at, and every possibility. So please get behind any and all options to make this a much safer crossing. And the Belisha beacon actually is damaged, Councillor King, due to a recent crash. So that would need to be inspected and possibly repaired as well. Just for information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nugent-Finn.
Thank you. And particularly for the information about the Belisha beacon. I can't see it from where I live.
Moving on, question 9, again from Councillor Nugent-Finn to the Cabinet Member of Health and Social Care.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Nugent-Finn. We had 24 suppliers at the recruitment event in Penarth at the beginning of November. This was a joint event held with independent providers of domiciliary care, nursing care and residential care, and our internal Vale Community Resource Service and residential homes. 26 interested individuals attended the event. We've had a number of inquiries since the event, but are unable to provide a specific figure as to the number who've subsequently taken up a caring role, as all attendees liaise with the individual providers directly. Paul Pickering, Employment Mentor, School Improvement Inclusion Division from Barry Community Enterprise Centre, attended all day, and we liaised with Beryl Williams, Barry Job Centre, and Caroline Griffiths from Penarth Job Centre to advertise and signpost from the Job Centre perspective. Both attended on the day to show their support. The event is one initiative among a number to support the recruitment and retention of care staff. We'll be planning an event in Barry in the new year, so we'll explore as part of those arrangements to see if there's any further engagement required with DWP's Opportunity Knox.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Nugent-Finn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Gray. 26 attended. That I don't know in terms of engagement, if you're expecting more or less, but I'm really pleased to hear that it's coming to Barry as well, and let me know what I can do to support. But in terms of agreement and recruitment and outcomes, do you think working with the existing Vale and Glamorgan schemes, because obviously your objectives are aligned, would have been a good idea? For example, Opportunity Knox, because they do seek to develop skills and secure employment.
I mean, I think I laid out how we were working in partnership, and I'd also point the member to our Fast Track to Care programme that's going to be launching in the new year, which is going to provide opportunities for individuals to have a 2-week intense course of training and support. Details are going to be sort of shared in the next couple of days with the launch of that, so I hope you can get involved with sharing this. But yeah, any and all possible programs we can work alongside. There is a recruitment crisis in care, and we're doing everything possible to work with as many people as we can to get as many carers into the system as possible. So I'm really excited about Fast Track to Care programme. I think it's going to be great, and I'll always hold those under advisement, as you know, and regularly obviously come along to scrutiny and talk about the issues that we're facing. So I look forward to working in partnership.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Thank you, Councillor Nugent-Finn.
Thank you both.
Question 10 is from Councillor George Carroll to the Leader.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, George Carroll, Councillor Carroll. The simple answer, really, it's too soon to estimate the potential impact of the Omicron variant of COVID-19. But clearly everyone should take the potential impact of this variant seriously and continue to take the necessary actions to prevent the spread of any COVID-19 variant. I did say when I wrote this, I did say I was unaware of these cases within our county, but I'm still unsure whether it's actually in our county, but I understand now that there is a case within Cardiff and the Vale, and possibly more since that come about. Because I was going to say that there wasn't one, but clearly that will continue to be the case, and I've been proved right, unfortunately. And hence my comments about staying safe and taking the necessary precautions. That said, our understanding of the transmissibility of the Omicron variant and its potential impacts is still developing, although all the impacts that we've seen is that it's probably more virulent than even the Delta version. So the council is working closely with the public health partners, as we do, to put place in measures that will continue to protect the most vulnerable in our communities. And as you know, governments have already made some changes to the law on arriving travellers and other protective measures. Any further restrictions and subsequent associated advice will be published and promoted by this council to ensure the public are aware of any actions they need to take, including any further vaccinations that may become available.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Do you wish to add?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I thank the Leader for his answer, and I would endorse the Leader's comments about being taken care in relation to the variant. In his answer, Madam Mayor, the Leader made reference to the work the authority is doing with public health partners in monitoring the Omicron variant. Has the Leader and or his officers held any meetings with either the Welsh Government or Public Health Wales in relation to the variant, and are there any further meetings planned in the coming days or weeks?
I can confirm that I, along with the Managing Director and the Leader and Managing Director in Cardiff, meet with the Health Authority and members of Public Health Wales on a fortnightly basis at the moment. It likely could, if things go on, it'll go back to where we were previously, or meeting once a week. I continually meet with Welsh Government ministers on various topics, and that also includes the pandemic. So I'm continually talking to someone about it, but we do have and in fact, apart from that, as a council, our senior management team meets on a weekly basis. Usually, if anything's there's urgent, we'll bring it up every week. Otherwise, we meet on a COVID-19 principle. So in other words, we meet once a fortnight to deal with any things relating to the pandemic. But at any time, in any of the meetings, if there's an urgency, it is raised automatically. So I can assure you that we meet and we continue to talk about what we can do, where we can do it. And the other thing is, of course, you have to give praise to our test and trace officers who are out and about. Apart from just checking when people have had COVID-19 and need to check whether or not they're complying with the regulations, but also in terms of working with the police in the joint enforcement teams, the JET teams, as they're called, in order to ensure that if things are being done which shouldn't be done, are curtailed. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Thank you, Leader. Next question, question 11 from Councillor Carroll to the Member for Social Care and Health.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I'm of course happy to provide an update as requested. It's a large topic area, and given there's nothing specific for me to address, all I can really say is I'm in regular discussion with the UHB on matters relating to GP services across the Vale of Glamorgan. I have regular meetings with the chair of the UHB and other senior officials. With a focus more recently on the Eastern Vale, I know senior officers are having similar dialogue with officials in the UHB. If Councillor Carroll has something more specific in mind, then hopefully I can address this more specific points.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thank the Cabinet Member for his answer. My constituents are very concerned by the planned closure of Albert Road Surgery in Penarth in March 2022 and the impacts that this will have on GP provision in the Eastern Vale area. Will the authority write to the Cardiff and Vale University Health Board to express these concerns and request assurances that that provision will be maintained?
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I should probably declare I'm a patient of Albert Road Surgery as a resident in the Eastern Vale, but In terms of Albert Road Surgery announcing the recent closure, as you refer to, I'm sure Councillor Carroll will have seen the press release jointly issued with the UHB, and I want to emphasise the council has already made a number of suggestions and offers to the UHB regarding the potential options in the short term so that patients can continue to receive a service. These include the pinpointing of certain sites and buildings that could be used to accommodate Albert Road Surgery in the short term. This is all whilst recognising, of course, ultimately the provision of GP services is a matter for the GPs themselves and the UHB. So, I mean, I'm happy to formally write, but I mean, we're already in dialogue, and I'd hope you can see from my answer that we're already trying to come up with practical solutions that can assist with making sure that the provision is there. And of course, I want to impart onto the UHB that it's important that all patients are reassured this isn't something that can wait until March next year. We need to be getting out ahead of this, but I really hope that the UHB follow through on that and share that information. My understanding is there will be an opportunity to transfer patients, but I really want the UHB to detail that out so that all residents understand, all patients understand the situation as it affects that surgery, and I do fear that this can potentially happen again in other parts of the Vale. I don't think this is specifically just an Albert Road Surgery issue, and certainly we've heard from members of the government at Welsh and UK level about the effects on GP recruitment. So. As you appreciate, it's not strictly a council function to provide GP services, but I am absolutely 100% engaged with the UHB in trying to work through whatever solutions we can, as are other senior, councillors and officials in the council.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Question number 12 is from Councillor Charles to the Cabinet Member for Housing and Building Services.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Janice. Councillor Charles. In starting, can I say how thrilled I am to see the step-up accommodation developed at Court Road. It is envy of many local authorities who have asked to visit the site. I am delighted that the Vale is leading the way in this kind of provision, which is so essential to ensure our most vulnerable residents have a roof over their heads. The Housing Development Team continues to search for and look at sites in order to determine their probability for emergency housing scheme lodges, similar to that at Court Road. Former HRA garage sites, parking areas and general fund land holdings are currently being considered. The Housing Development Team is also seeking to repurchase general fund buildings and look at buildings that we can convert to increase the supply of temporary accommodation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Charles, wish a supplementary?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Councillor Wilkinson. I knew you would have a hand on this. The mental well-being and the pride which the residents now have living in these lodges is just absolutely wonderful. I know that they have been looking after the gardens with the pear trees and the apple trees, and to see how happy these people are and how their mental well-being is just so completely changed and how well they are now. And as there are 65 homeless people living in temporary accommodation at the Holiday Inn alone, and you have touched on what you're doing, but do you know how long it will be before they can be allocated more permanent accommodation, if possible?
There is 240 homeless people in 3 hotels in the Vale of Glamorgan. We are looking at sites to improve our homes for these people. That is why we need to build more council properties. I cannot give you a complete date when these people will be moved on. We are involved with private landlords and we are hoping to build some more of these lodges. But until we can build more council properties, I cannot give you a date that this list will go down, because we have 6,000 on the waiting list as well. And that is going to get worse, I believe, in this time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you, Councillor Charles. Question 13 is from Councillor Charles, the Cabinet Member for Leisure, Arts and Culture.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Charles, for your question. However, I am slightly baffled by it. Information in relation to the gallery's activities and exhibitions being marketed with the support of the Council's communications team. They're on the Vale Glamorgan website, they've been featured in social media, the local press and via Eventbrite for booking. We do have an indicative 12-month gallery plan for 2022 which is being finalised, pending confirmation with each exhibitor, and we will publish this again shortly.
Thank you, Councillor.
Supplementary, please.
McCaffrey, supplementary, Councillor Charles.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm baffled by your answer as well. Given that communications from the gallery were strongly criticised in the recent consultation, and there is at the moment a very limited programme, I would like to know when this will be enforced.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. I think it's just been one of those difficult times in relation to the COVID pandemic and how galleries could operate, what people were allowed to do, what artists wanted to allow their work to be shown. But all the way through the pandemic, we've offered online exhibitions that people could log on to from the safety of their own homes as they were unsure about coming out of their homes. We have an exhibition in the gallery now about the Welsh group, and this is a multi-user exhibition from various artists across the Vale. The changes of the restrictions is what kind of holds them back to a certain degree, but we do have ongoing events coming up both in Arts Central and across the pavilion as well. So I'm sorry that you feel there hasn't been enough information out there. I'm aware of what the consultation said, and it's something that we've absolutely dealt with in relation to the criticism that was levelled about it.
Thank you, Councillor McCaffrey. Thank you, Councillor Charles.
Supplementary, please.
Supplementary.
Thank you. Could the gallery cooperate with the new expressive arts curriculum in Wales and host events and exhibitions which would help Vale teachers deliver this new curriculum? This space would and should then function better for young people doing drama, photography, arts, textiles, music, etc., and would also help to regenerate the town centre. Thank you very much, Councillor McArthur.
That's okay, Councillor Charles. I certainly will take all those points on board. I'm not sure now whether that's that supplementary question to what I'd said or a supplementary question to your next question about how more young people got involved in the gallery.
It was the second one. I'm sorry.
No,
it's been a long night.
It's fine. No, it certainly has been a long night. I can absolutely agree with you there. Yes, I will certainly take your points on board, and I know that we do have lots of plans to involve young people, but thank you for making that suggestion. I will certainly come back to our officers and see what we can do in relation to that. We have previously had really successful exhibitions with, for example, the Cardiff and Vale College art students, so yes, I'll certainly look at that for you.
Councillor Charles, can I just clarify that was question 14?
Yep, so we can skip that one now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McArthur. Question 15 is from Councillor Driscoll to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Driscoll. The total income for all car parks in the Vale of Glamorgan from the 1st of April to the 26th of November 2021 is £773,144, excluding VAT. I repeat, in digits 773,144.
Oh, thank you.
Councillor King. Councillor Driscoll.
Yes, quick one. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor King, for that. It's quite a substantial amount. My supplementary is following on from several councils round Wales. Will you be getting into Christmas spirit and cancelling parking charges for the Christmas period and the New Year period?
It's an interesting suggestion you make, Councillor, but my view has been that the whole purpose of introducing car parking charges was to encourage churn and turnover. And the feedback that we've had to date has been that we've substantially achieved that, and therefore we're actually helping get more shoppers into town to shop, and then go home and let the next batch in. So at the moment, the answer is no. I've got no plans to disturb that.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor King. Question 16 is from Councillor Rowlands to the Cabinet Member for Housing and Building Services.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. The response repairs completed on the council properties from the 1st of the 4th 21 to the 31st of the 10th 21 are 5,274. The response repairs completed on the council properties from the 1st of the 4th 20 to the 31st of the 3rd 21 are 6,741.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Rowlands.
Thank you to the Cabinet Member, and thank you, Madam Mayor. Let me have a supplementary. Can I thank the Cabinet Member for that answer? Would she agree with me? I'm sure she would. And in relation to a tenant waiting for about 4 months for what that the tenant would class as an urgent repair, and I would also class as an urgent repair, is unacceptable. And I know the Cabinet Member would probably agree with me in relation to, or would say, would she do everything in her power to ensure that tenants are not waiting 4 months for repairs? I know it's difficult sometimes, but 4 months is a long time to get something that a tenant would class as as an urgent repair to be done. It's not really acceptable, is it? So I just wanted that was my supplementary.
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. Well, if you give me the information, I will look into it. But can I say there is COVID still about? We have officers that are off with COVID, but the repairs are with the materials that's gone, and we cannot get them at the moment. They are in short supply. But if you gave me the name and address or any information of that tenant, I will take up that personally.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. Thank you, Cabinet Member.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. Question 17 is from Councillor Rowlands to the Leader.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. As I will advise Mrs. Ockerby in response to her question as part of the next agenda item, I will also remind all members of this council that work from home advice continues to be relevant in Wales, and as a public authority, we need to be mindful that we lead by example. This is particularly relevant given the ongoing and concerning high numbers of COVID-19 cases, and I've just lost it. Sorry, shouldn't have touched something.
Top of the list.
Sorry, can you bear with me a second? I did something that I shouldn't have done. I put it on my iPad.
That's okay. Take time.
Boris Johnson.
Yeah, well, not quite. I didn't go to Peppa Pig Land. This is particularly relevant given the ongoing and concerning high number of COVID-19 cases and the pressure on the health and social care setting. So to encourage large-scale public meetings at such a time would be inappropriate, as it is to hold Christmas parties. I also find Councillor Rowland's question surprising, given that the change in situation relating to the new multivariant mutation Omicron, the pandemic is far from being over. With regard to hybrid solutions for meetings, the Council is currently working with the provider Civico in tailoring an app, Civico app, to meet the needs of the Council, which will also include a Welsh translation facility. A report detailing the work undertaken to date is to be presented to Cabinet shortly, which will include details of a training timetable for elected members and officers of the Council in the use of the app over the coming months. The Civico app can be used on both a virtual and a hybrid basis, but as I have already mentioned, in line with the Welsh Government advice, council meetings will continue to be held on a virtual basis until determined otherwise. Any move to vary from this stance would, in my view, be inappropriate and unnecessary, especially as meeting functions perfectly well on a virtual platform. In fact, yeah, everybody can meet quite safely as we are. I know there will be some exceptions, because clearly in terms of some meetings may need to be face-to-face, but in general, we will not be having meetings within the office unless it's absolutely necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. Thank you, Captain Leader. Supplementary?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't have a supplementary, but I do now after that answer. So I find it very baffling that the fact that the Welsh Government and the Assembly are meeting in person as well, using the hybrid, and also our town and community councils are doing the same. I sit on Barry Town Council and they can easily do a hybrid model. So my supplementary is, why can't the Vale do it? I understand, obviously, we have a new variant and that type of stuff, but there was talk of us perhaps in the new year of going to a hybrid model. Why is it one rule for the Vale and one rule for Welsh Government?
Well, it's up to Welsh Government, it's up to anybody else to consider what they do. But if you'd listened to my answer, then I told you that we were working with a provider, Civico, to tailor an app which meets the needs of everybody. It will have a Welsh translation. It can be used both as a hybrid meeting and otherwise. But the other question you've got to ask yourself is, why have hybrid meetings? Other councils may want to. I think if we're asked to look at it, we can say, why should we? Maybe. There's no democratic deficit from working virtually. All members can engage and debate perfectly reasonably, as we have done tonight. And why would we place people at risk by varying that approach, especially given the development around Omicron? But saying that, as I also said, and if you listened, was that we are tailoring it, but we wanted to make sure that the app is up and running properly. And once we have the app up and running properly, we want to ensure that the elected members and officers are able to use it properly. So we will do it, and it will be coming. I'm just saying we're not doing it quite yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands. Thank you, Leader. Now we go on to questions from members of the public. Question number 1 is from Dr. A. Barrett, to the Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Barrett, for your question about South Point Primary in Roos. South Point Primary School will be open to pupils from the 28th of February 2022, following the end of the spring half term. Currently, there will be 77 pupils on roll when the new site is operational. The Council is currently accepting applications for reception places for September 2022 and has so far received 7 first preference applications for the reception intake since the process opened just on the 5th of November. This is encouraging as the process does not close until the 14th of January 2022 and further applications are anticipated. There are also 14 nursery pupils joining the school over this academic year, and the parents of 7 older pupils have already applied to join the school when it moves to its new location early next year. Based on the information to date, the current pupil number projections are as follows. In 21-22 it's 77, in 22-23 it's 89, in 23-24 it's 92, 24-25 95, and 25-26 101. These projections will clearly need reviewing on completion of the reception annual admission round for September 2022, as projections are influenced by parental preference, which is forecast to improve once the school is situated in its new accommodation, as has been the case with other school development programmes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Question 2 is from Mrs. Kay Walters, to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mrs. Walters. Mrs. Walters is asking about Jubilee Park, Sully. This play area is leased to Sully Community Council, and any upgrade to this play area would need to be instigated by Sully Community Council. Therefore, it would be beneficial to approach Sully Community Council in the first instance. We have worked in partnership with various community councils on schemes within their areas in the past, and this is something we can explore if and when we're approached. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. So question 3 is from Mrs. A. Blight to the Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration.
One second.
Councillor? Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration.
Number 3 is for...
Madam Mayor, number 3 is a question from Mr. A. Blake to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Transport.
Well,
I'm sorry.
It's not the one I've got. I'm sorry. I've got it from Mrs. Blight to the Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration. I do apologise.
I think, Madam Mayor, Mrs. Blight was contacted because it was actually not Cabinet Member for Education's portfolio, but in fact Councillor King's.
Oh, I'm sorry about that, but I was given. On my defence, I was given duff information.
Absolutely.
I'll second that, as I wasn't paying enough attention because I'd read that it was for education and regeneration. So with apologies to everyone, especially the Mayor and Mrs. Blight, and thank you for your question. Mrs. Blight is asking about sea level rises, and in reply, I will say the Vale of Glamorgan Council is in the fortunate position when considering future sea level rises when compared to other places in Wales. The coastline of the Vale of Glamorgan, particularly around the Barry area, is considered at low risk of flooding due to its topography, with a significant length of cliff protecting inland areas from coastal flooding. Further, there is generally a negligible risk of significant cliff erosion over the next 20 years. The Vale of Glamorgan Council is a coastal risk management authority and member of the Swansea and Carmarthen Bay Coastal Group. That group is tasked with maintaining the shoreline management plans for large sections of the South Wales coastline, and copies of these plans can be found at the South Wales Coastal Group.cymru website, with further information also available regarding coastal protection via the Council's own website. The Vale of Glamorgan Council's actions have informed the shoreline management plans, which provide recommended policies in respect of possible sea level rises and coastal erosion. The Council's future planning and development management role will also be directed and driven by national planning advice contained within the new Technical Advice Note 15, which seeks to take account of the impact of climate change in terms of future flooding impacts when assessing developments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Question 4 from Mrs. B. Roberts to the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mrs. Roberts. Who's asking about the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. I understand, Mrs. Roberts, that you've been in recent discussion with my highways team who have responded to you, and that you have already been advised recently of the personal injury collisions PIC record for the 5-year period up to the 25th of June 2020, the latest data supplied to us by Welsh Government. The only 2 personal injury collisions recorded during that period both occurred on Porth y Castell in 2017, resulting in slight injuries. The first PIC occurred in January 2017 when a vehicle stopped to give way to oncoming traffic and a vehicle following closely behind struck it. The second occurred in June 2017 when a vehicle pulled out from the side of the road and collided with a passing vehicle. Neither of the causation factors mentioned in the police report suggests that vehicle speed was an issue. You will also be aware that Welsh Government has announced plans for a national default 20 mph speed limit on Welsh roads to replace the current 30-mile-an-hour default speed. The benefits of such a proposal are well publicised and recognised by me and the Council to enhance highway safety and encourage active travel. It is currently anticipated this speed reduction will come into place in Wales in 2023. As part of the proposed default speed limits change from 30 to 20 mph, Welsh Government has also invited all councils in Wales to participate in a scheme to trial a change from 20 mph within their areas. The aim of the trials was to develop enforcement arrangements and overcome any unforeseen issues before the full rollout commenced. The invitation to participate is now closed, but 8 pilot areas were successful, including St Bride's Major within the Vale of Glamorgan. The outcome of the pilots and the recent public consultation will capture long-term data and assist in developing an enforcement strategy for the planned national rollout of default 20-mile-an-hour speed limit for Wales in April 23. When the Wales default 20 mph speed limit is introduced, I anticipate that all roads within the garden suburbs will be included. Given the good safety record within the road network for the garden suburbs development as referenced above, as well as the future change to the default speed limit proposed by Welsh Government in a little over 18 months' time, I regret that I am unable to support the request to change to the speed limit in the garden suburbs prior to the Welsh Government rollout of 20 mph. Now, in terms of the East Aberthaw, I need to say that there are currently no plans to implement a 20 mph speed limit to the rollout of the national initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King.
Thank you, Councillor King. And just for the record, the police at Beacon on Cardiff Road has already been reported, and I'd hoped it would have been fixed by now, but there you go. I got a question from Rob Curtis here, so thank you, Rob, for the question. It's in relation to notice for trees targeted for removal. It's in relation to trees which are taken down. The decision to remove a tree is never an easy one, and not something that we undertake lightly. The removal of a tree is always a final option and only taken after other viable solutions to retain the street have been investigated. I can confirm that we already place a sign on a street tree a week prior to any removal work being undertaken to advise vehicles not to park in the vicinity of the tree to be removed. However, we do not outline the reason for the removal, but residents can contact us via the details on the notice to obtain further information about the removal or to discuss the arrangements for replanting. It should, however, be noted that one of the most common reasons for tree removal is to avoid third-party claims against the council for property damage. In such cases, the details will be confidential and not able to be disclosed. I hope that helps, Rob. Thanks.
Thank you, Leader. Question 6 is from Mr. G. Thomas, Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Thomas, whose question is actually questioning the process for the introduction of parking regulations at Cosmeston. My answer is that the recently implemented resident parking controls at Cosmeston have been progressed in accordance with the policy agreed by the Council's Cabinet at its meeting of Monday the 27th of July 2020 and in accordance with the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984 and the Road Traffic Act 1988. As part of the resident parking controls policy, an informal consultation was carried out at Cosmeston, with letters being issued to all residents who would be affected by any potential scheme, comprising those properties within Lavernock Park Estate and the Upper Cosmeston Farm. That consultation took place during October 2020 and concluded on Sunday the 1st November 2020. From analysis of the information obtained during that consultation and in accordance with the policy, there was overwhelming support for the introduction of resident parking controls within the residential areas at Cosmeston. As a result of this positive response, the Council proposed a new resident-only permit parking areas traffic regulation order, TRO, to be introduced in Cosmeston and indeed other areas. The statutory legal public notice of the proposal was given on the 22nd of April 2021, inviting objections in writing by the 14th of May 2021, containing the grounds upon which any objection was being made. A number of formal objections were received to the proposal, and as a result, a report was subsequently prepared and considered by the Council's Cabinet on the 21st of June 2021 to determine if the TRO should be implemented. Cabinet Minute C603, available via the Council's website, confirms the resolution made by Cabinet and that the objections to the proposed TRO be rejected for the reasons explained and the proposed residence parking controls TRO be implemented. The required formal notice making for the order was advertised in the local press and notices erected on site to confirm that the order would come into operation on the 19th of July 2021, and arrangements made to install the necessary signage to implement the resident parking permit zone at both Lavernock Park Estate and Upper Cosmeston Farm. As a result, I consider all the correct procedures were followed in accordance with the requirements of the new policy and the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984. I am therefore satisfied that all necessary processes were followed, and as required by the law, the public were given 21 days to lodge any objections to the proposals, and having considered all the objections received within the statutory timeframe, the order was made and came into operation on the 19th of July 2021. I do not accept the process was flawed or biased in any way, with residents having the opportunity to express their opinions during both the informal resident consultation and then during the public consultation to implement the TRO, when the views of objectors were fully considered, along with the significant benefits offered by the proposed restrictions, and a reasonable and legitimate decision was taken to progress with the proposed resident parking controls traffic regulation order. Based on the lawful and legitimate process by which the resident parking controls were introduced, the Council will not be investigating the situation further or suspending the parking regulations in place at this stage, as the Council has made a commitment to review the operation of all the recent resident parking restrictions 12 months after implementation. As part of this review, consideration will be given to making any reasonable adjustments to the orders and restrictions at that time. I hope that this clarifies the legal process followed to implement the resident-only parking permit parking areas and the Council's commitment to review such arrangements. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Question 7 is from Mrs. C. Ockerby to the Executive Leader, Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources.
Thank you, Mrs. Ockerby, and this is in relation to CCTV in Holton Road. CCTV cameras on Holton Road towards King Square are currently online, although on occasions are not fully operational due to the essential maintenance. One camera is currently under repair, but the remaining cameras are being monitored by the CCTV control room, with relevant information from the control room being passed to the police. Given the recent escalation of incidents on Holton Road, an additional redeployable camera is being installed at King Square, with a site visit recently undertaken to determine a suitable camera location. The Council has a zero tolerance policy in relation to serious antisocial behaviour, and perpetrators identified from the CCTV will be dealt with in line with those policies. In addition to CCTV, the Vale Glamorgan Community Safety Team, in partnership with the police, other agencies and stakeholders, have met to consider other options to resolve issues of antisocial behaviour generally in the area. Since September, when 13 incidents of antisocial behaviour were recorded, further occurrences have reduced, with 8 noted in October. and to date only one incident in November. And as we're now in December, I assume that's the same number. The community safety team will continue to actively monitor the situation around Central Park and surrounding areas, and will work with partners to consider further measures should they prove necessary. Thank you.
Leader. Question 8 is for Mrs. Arkin, Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Huckabee, who's asking about the cleaning of graffiti. In reply, I can say that the offender responsible for several of the graffiti incidents on Halton Road was required to carry out 8 hours of community service, which was completed and resulted in cleaning of some of the graffiti in the area. Partnership work with the Youth Offending Service and Probation is being carried out to plan for service users support with cleaning of graffiti and will commence shortly. The Town Centre Management Group has been proactively working on solutions in relation to the issues on Halton Road and King Square and the problems relating to graffiti. Progress from the actions of this meeting includes the completion of the graffiti project on the wall at the old Burton's shop site. Council Town Centre officers continue to investigate ownership of properties across the Vale and engage with property owners to encourage clean-up of graffiti and to resolve any issues owners may have. The council and local policing colleagues have continued to engage positively with the retailers, and the Youth Offending Service has continued to engage with young people. A consultation exercise led by our youth service is underway to ascertain what alternative activities they feel could help divert young people away from antisocial behaviour and disorder, and scoping work is being carried out to look at the feasibility of a youth club provision to reduce antisocial behaviour occurring in these hotspot locations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Question number 9 from Ms. Huckabee to Cabinet Member for Leisure, Arts and Culture.
Thank you, Ms. Huckabee, for your question in relation to the removal of the slide at Vale Leisure Centre. Unfortunately, the slide at the Leisure Centre was beyond economical repair and we had to remove it. We, almost in compensation for that, I can't even speak now, it's too late. The owners and runners of the Leisure Centre Legacy have put a inflatable section in the pool instead of having a slide there. We do try and seek the views of customers and obviously all our residents in the Vale whenever possible. The recent move to, as we did so in the recent move, to the changing room accommodation, but it's not always possible to do that as we have some funding time constraints. There have been many lessons learned through the pandemic, and one of these is the absolute need for an open air fitness area, and we needed this to complement the leisure centre there. So instead of having a redundant space, which the slide that can't be used, we've now placed orders for equipment and materials to install a new outdoor fitness area that will be for the benefit of all of our members of the leisure centre.
McCaffer. Question number 10, again from Mrs. Huckabee, to Cabinet Member for Legal, Regulatory and Planning Services.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Huckabee, for the question related to planning licence applications. So all the most up-to-date information is available via the online plan register, as you've indicated, which allows customers to search for exactly what they're looking for. And you know, I can give examples by application by ward, applications determined or applications received within a specified time frame. The register also includes a very easy access menu, which allows the public to view all applications started within either the last 7 or 28 days. And this register is available online, but also at the council docs office via a dedicated terminal in the reception. And by all means, if you want some assistance on how to search that, then that can be offered by the officers. Vale Glamorgan is also one of the few councils in Wales to have a planning duty officer available by phone, email or face-to-face at the dock office at all times throughout the normal working week. You can answer any general inquiries about planning or help you to find the information they're looking for. In addition to the above, the council notifies anyone affected by planned development in accordance with our statutory duties including letters to neighbours, site notices and press notices where necessary, in addition to publishing information on our website. Each month, the Council receives around 180 new plan applications, and a list published outside the Civic Office would be too long to be truly meaningful and would only benefit a very small number of customers who pass by the notice board. Therefore, the Council has no plans to introduce this. Thank you, Mayor. Oh, sorry, let me just continue. As regards licensing, notice of licence applications involving the grant or major variation of a premises, like pubs, off licences, licensed takeaways and registered members clubs, are currently published as follows: in a local newspaper, post on the premises itself, or on the Council's website. Each notice will give brief details of the application and the last date for submitted representations. A link to the Licensing Act public notices is available under the Working tab on the Council's website. We have no plans to publish the details elsewhere, as this would be labour intensive and costly, and our current arrangements comply fully with our legal duties. Thank you, Mayor.
Question 11 is from Mrs. Ockerby, to Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood Services and Transport.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Ockerby, who's asking about communications with Dŵr Cymru. In reply, the Council is not responsible for the discharge from the combined sewer outfall, and this is a matter for Welsh Water and Natural Resources Wales as the permitting body. I would therefore respectfully suggest that you contact Welsh Water directly regarding this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Question number 12 from Ms. Ockerby.
Thank you again, Mayor. Thank you again, Ms. Ockerby, who's asking about Nels Point car park. In reply, the current Nels Point car park was created as a meanwhile use while marketing of the site was undertaken. Previous marketing exercises undertaken in 2012 and again in 2015 unfortunately proved unsuccessful for various reasons. However, it remains the ambition of the Council to promote the site for suitable tourism or leisure uses in the future. Should any development proposals be brought forward for this site in the future, parking requirements and the continued free flow of traffic to and from the Barry Island area will be fully considered as part of this development process. Also, in the light of the declared climate emergency, we will continue to promote active travel and the use of public transport as the most appropriate means of accessing the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Next one is for me, question 13, I think, again from Ms. Ockerby. It's in relation to public engagement. I'm a bit surprised at the question. I don't recognise the issue that this has been raised through questions. As a member, I check and reply to all emails on a daily basis. I also know that officers are just as accessible whether they're working at home or in the office. Irrespective of whether officers and members are working remotely, they still work on the council network. So there will be no change in the way the emails are handled. The same council standards still apply to dealing with emails and correspondence, despite the fact that we may be working differently. If there are any issues in contacting specific councillors, then any concern in the first instance should be taken up with the relevant political group leader. The settings of an individual's email account determines which emails are routed to their junk folder. The sender, and in this matter, the council has no control over those settings. If a citizen are having difficulties when making general requests for services or for information, the citizen may find it quicker and easier to use an online form or email contact Vale at c1v@valeglamorgan.gov.uk. However, if having considered my response, Mrs. Ockerby has specific examples, can I ask her that she forward those to me or the Managing Director with details so we can consider it further? I think basically there was a suggestion that answers were being sent to junk mails, and clearly that's out of our control. But as far as everyday work is concerned, whether you work at home or in the office, we're still connected to the same network. So thank you for your question.
Thank you, Leader. Question 14, again from Ms. Ockerby, Leader, about the Vale Council meetings.
It is indeed. It's in relation to Vale Council meetings, and I did give an answer partly to this earlier. The answer is relatively straightforward. The work from home advice continues to be relevant in Wales, and as a public authority, we need to be mindful that we lead by example. This is particularly relevant given the ongoing and concentrating high numbers of COVID-19 cases and the pressure on the health and social care setting. To encourage large-scale public meetings at such a time would be inappropriate. And again, we would argue that it's the same thing with any unnecessary meetings or parties. It's also important to realise that the pandemic has not gone away, and new variants are currently circulating. And again, at the time I wrote this, I said, thankfully not yet in the Vale of Glamorgan, but clearly the Omicron virus is very virulent. Therefore, we all need to be mindful that we should take all steps necessary to protect our community, as well as ourselves and our loved ones. I would, in any event, suggest that this question is totally misleading, as it fails to take into account the situation in relation to COVID-19, as referred to in my response to the question asked previously in this forum. The public do have a presence, just as elected members do. They are not disadvantaged. The only difference is that they are not physically present when they're observing meetings. There is complete transparency. The public have full access to all information under consideration at meetings, save obviously for confidential matters, which can be accessed on the Council's website and well in advance of the meetings taking place. Apart from that, obviously, we are live streaming our meetings, and they are recorded on the Council's website for posterity. So thank you very much for the question.
Thank you, Leader. Question 15, again, for the Cabinet Member for Transport, Mrs. Ogilvie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mrs. Ogilvie, who's asking about the closure of 5 Mile Lane. Unfortunately, we're not always able to give prior notice of urgent works undertaken on the highway. In this case, the A4226 5 Mile Lane had to be closed northbound from its junction at Port Road to the A48 at Sycamore Cross as an emergency from 9 AM on the 8th of November 2021 to carry out essential carriageway repair works comprising the concrete overrun area on the northwestern side of Waycock Cross roundabout junction. The concrete overrun area had failed and represented a significant hazard to the travelling public. The works were completed by Friday the 12th at 1 PM, although as the concrete works were only completed 24 hours earlier, a decision was taken to leave the closure in place until Sunday 10 AM to allow the concrete to properly cure. The temporary closure and traffic management was removed as planned at 10 AM Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Question 16 for the Leader from Mrs. Ockerby.
Thank you very much. This is in relation to consultations. I can confirm that the Council is committed to consulting with citizens as part of the decision-making processes. We're committed to developing our approach to involving, engaging and consulting citizens, and this is reflected in both the corporate plan and the animal delivery plan, with the latter being consulted on this month. Over the past year or so, a range of different and innovative methods of consultation have been used, including social media posts, polls, quick surveys and online workshops to increase the opportunity for people to become involved. These have covered a diverse range of topics such as climate change, the animal delivery plan and the future use of Penarth Pier Pavilion. The outcomes from the consultations have directly informed the subsequent actions we have taken, and I think we had a query earlier on today in relation to Art Central too. So we also dealt with that. The Council is currently forthcoming. A public participation strategy will be set out in more details and the details of those steps will be taken in this regard. So the council is coming up with a further strategy, so we are continuing to do it. And one of the things we're currently doing is obviously, and we've been doing this week, is consulting and making people aware of the budget responsibilities and the budget process that we're currently embarking upon. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Leader. Question 17 from Ms Ockerby to the Cabinet Member for Legal, Regulatory and Planning Services.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms Ockerby. This question regarding planning conditions, in particular Haydock House. As you're aware, through the development management system, various mechanisms can be put in place to ensure that development which is granted planning permission is undertaken in accordance with the specified details and plans relating to the approved scheme. The Council is also able to attach detailed planning conditions in order to control how the development is undertaken, including the use of external materials. However, once development has commenced, there's no requirement in planning law for it to be completed. The inclusion of a condition requiring the completion of all development within a restricted timeframe would not meet the required tests of being necessary, reasonable or enforceable, and cannot be imposed by this council or any other council. This has been confirmed by case law and reviews of previous decisions by the courts. Whilst there is provision within planning legislation to secure the completion of development which has been started but not completed by means of a completion notice, if the reason for non-completion is due to financial considerations, the notice is unlikely to be successful, and in practice, these are only therefore used in exceptional circumstances. In the case of Haydock House, the Council is aware of the reasons why Harvard Housing Association has not progressed the development and remains in close contact with him regarding the completion of their scheme. While it is unfortunate that the scheme has not progressed to date, this has been due to a number of reasons beyond the control of Harvard, but we do understand that the work is due to recommence in the spring to complete the scheme in accordance with the planning permission. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. And finally, question 18 from Ms Ockerby to Cabinet Member for Legal, Regulatory and Planning Service.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms Ockerby. And this question relates to replacement draft LDP, and in particular queries why Beautiful Barry is not part of the list that's on the people who were consulted. The list of general consultation bodies in Appendix 1 of the draft delivery agreement is not intended to be exhaustive, and other organisations' bodies can be added in as appropriate. However, as Beautiful Barry is a social media public group, it's not considered to be a voluntary body for the purpose of the delivery agreement. If Beautiful Barry wish to be kept informed of progress on the replacement LDP and formally consulted, they should complete the Register Your Interests form, which is on the website. So you will be able to enrol on that. In addition, the current consultation on draft delivery agreement and draft review report closes on 17th of December 2021, so there's still time to respond if you wish to. Comment forms are available on the website via the above link, and the link is, as I'm aware, you've been sent. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And that concludes all the questions from the members of the public. I have no items I deem urgent under Part 1 and nothing under Part 2. So I just wish you all a very happy Christmas and a healthy and safe New Year. And we'll see you back here in a few weeks' time. Good night now, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you all. And thank you for your support.
Good night. Thank you, Mayor. Good night. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Nostar.
Well done.